This page is the front cover of issue 22 of N64 Magazine. Looks like a December 1998 issue, going by the date in the corner, and it's priced at £2.95. Big splash for V-Rally 99, calling it the world's first review, and all you need to know. Seems like they're really pushing that Peugeot rally game. Above that in yellow, it's shouting about Perfect Dark, with 65 pics you've never seen before, and a page number 34, building the hype for Rare's new shooter. Everyone was waiting for that one back then. Then there's F0X, in blue, telling you to buy it now, and page 82, reckon that one had been out a bit already, but still a fast racer. And Body Harvest, in orange, reviewed as, the N64's brainiest bloodfest yet. Dory, page 65, remember that one being a bit different, a bit of a weird sci-fi action game. Down at the bottom there's a little globe character holding a controller, talking about Japanese and US news and reviews. Must be the import section. Always good to see what was coming over from Japan or what the Yanks were playing. There are also small boxes for Silicon Valley on page 54 and WCW vs NWO Revenge on page 73, so looks like they're getting a bit of coverage too. And it says 132 pages for your N64. Ooh, trying to tempt you with the page count. Standard stuff for a magazine cover really, hitting the big games and trying to get you to pick it up off the shelf. This page of N64 Magazine, right? It's laying out why you should be forking out your hard-earned for this mag, yeah? It's boasting about being the biggest and best, proper confident like. They're banging on about their Star Game Award being worth something, saying they play games properly before giving them out, which is fair enough. And they're keen to stress they're independent from Nintendo, meaning they can slag games off if they're rubbish. And they review games from Japan and America early, so you're in the know. They're all about UK games mostly. Not some obscure Japanese stuff you can't even play. Sensible. There's a bit in the middle, saying something's going on and you should flip back to the reviews, cheeky cliffhanger tactic that. The editor, James Ashton, is getting a bit excited because there are loads of reviews in this issue, 11 in fact, and loads of Stargame logos too. He mentions there are games for Christmas, name-dropping things like Body Harvest, which was a bit different, NFL Blitz for your American football fix, and then the big hitters like Zelda, Extreme G2, and Madden 99. Sounds like a packed month for the N64. He also mentions Wipeout and V-Rally 99 are in there, and that you can win money and learn about V-Rally 99 on other pages. Down at the bottom they're pushing a Fusoya fridge magnet game, using words to make daft reviews. The example is pretty grim, comparing a bad game to a smelly pizza and spunky sprouts. Charming. You can see the wordy magnets they've got, like spunky stick, sprouts, amazing from, aqua, psychopath, rubbish, grotesque, horse, egg, Mario, beef burger, Diddy Kong, Link, Zelda, Yoshi. Bit of a random bunch in it. All in all, typical N64 Magazine page from back in the day, trying to get you hyped for the latest games and throwing in a bit of daftness for good measure. This page is the contents page from issue 22 of N64 Magazine, December 1998, can you believe? Let's see what's in store. First up, Planet 64, the news section. Apparently there's a firm release date for Zelda in the UK, which is good news for any Nintendo fanboy. Nintendo going purple, that's a bit of a strange one. And Turok 2 slips, typical, always delays. Then coming soon section, oh blimey, South Park game, that was something else wasn't it, very of its time, Winback, Quake 2, Rat Attack, XG2, and All-Star Tennis, Warrington Norsa. Yeah, a right mixed bag of games there, something for everyone maybe. Warrington Norsa. Then we have N64 Arena, Warrington Norsa, with the reviews and that. V-Rally 99 is first, apparently the N64's finest rallying game yet. A bit strong maybe for a racing game on the 64, but we'll see. Exclusive review too, fancy that. Silicon Valley, a weird and wonderful world of animals in space. Sounds right odd that, doesn't it? NFL Blitz, arcade-style American football. Brilliant apparently. Always liked a bit of Blitz. Body Harvest, DMA's game. Finally here. Spectacular. We'll see if it lives up to the hype. WCW vs NWO, Revenge, fat blokes in pants again. Classic wrestling game for the time. Starshot Space Circus Fever, it wants to beat Banjo, it fails. Ouch. Not holding back with that review, are they? And then the regulars section. Information station for general stuff, tips extra for cheats, N64 shopper for games, Club 64, subscriptions, back issues if you missed one, directory which is every N64 game EVR reviewed in the mag, nicely and concisely they say, and finally, a look at what's in issue 23, with an unbelievably rotund N64 23rds, whatever that means, That's the contents page, gives you a flavor of what's inside this issue. Quite a few games to look forward to, and some reviews to have a read of. Standard stuff for a magazine back then, really. This page in N64 Magazine is a look at what's coming soon and the contents of the magazine itself. Up top, in the Future Look section, they're banging on about Castlevania 64 scary-faced antics and all that. Seemed alright at the time. Then there's Hybrid Heaven, described as some ace RPG thing. Play-tested for the first time, apparently never really took off, did it? Rayman 2 is also there. Another 3D adventure sequel. Looked quite colourful. Then we get to the actual contents. V-Rally 99 is given a big exclusive tag, claiming it's the best racing game on the N64 yet. Bit strong maybe? Remember all the racing games on the console? Bit of a bold claim. Rakuga Kids? Something a bit different. 2D beat-em-up? Not sure that was on many people's radars. NHL 99? Well, it's EA, isn't it? License-heavy ice hockey, if you're into that sort of thing. Gasp! Gets a bit of a slagging. A real old stinker on Pale. Avoid apparently, helpful of them. Import Arena is flagged up. Japanese and American games. For those who wanted something a bit different. NASCAR is in there too. Racing Ford Cortinas. In very large circles, each to their own I suppose. N64 How To is a weird one. Guides to ease you through life. Never really understood what that section was about. There's a competition to win Zelda 64 and 100 quid. Fridge magnet and review writing involved. Brains at the ready. And finally, a special investigation into Perfect Dark, with 65 shots you've never seen before. Bigging it up, as you'd expect, Perfect Dark was a big deal back then. Right at the side is the contents page itself, listing all these sections and their page numbers. Standard magazine fare, really. This page of N64 Magazine, issue 22 it seems, is having a good old look at some upcoming N64 titles. Right at the top, you can't miss that big Mario with the spiky ship, typical Nintendo promo stuff. The main feature is clearly Castlevania 64, or just Castle as they've headlined it all big and bold. Seems like Konami's having a crack at a 3D version of the old vampire slaying series, calling it a scare 'em up. They're talking about tricky platforming and comparing the controls a bit to Tomb Raider, which was all the rage back then. They reckon Konami needs to get it spot on so it's not too brutal for new players. Looking at the screenshots, you've got your typical Castlevania enemies like exploding skeletons. Apparently they go critical on your ass, charming, and three-headed dogs breathing fire naturally. There's a bit about a dragon's head on a stick weapon, sounds a bit odd. One picture shows the hero looking at a portcullis, and another one is of what they call the girl everyone laughs at, but apparently you wouldn't want to mess with her, honest. Down the side, in that This Month bit, they've given Castlevania 64 a 6 out of 10. Bit harsh perhaps even before it's out. Hybrid Heaven, some kind of futuristic RPG, gets an 8, and Rayman 2, that French 3D platformer, scores a perfect 10. So yeah, a first glimpse at what's coming to the N64, mostly focused on Castlevania. Looking a bit clunky as you'd expect for early 3D, but hey, it's Castlevania in it. This page in N64 Magazine, it's all about Castlevania 64, or just Evania Mania as they've called it. Bit dramatic, isn't it? They're previewing it, saying it's Konami's attempt to bring the series into 3D. After the PlayStation Symphony of the Night game, they reckon moving from 2D to 3D is a big deal. Fair enough I suppose. Kinaloo. They played a development version, and reckon it's as hard as the old games, which is good to hear. You start outside Dracula's castle, and have to battle all sorts. The screenshots show the classic Belmont character in action, whipping skeletons and opening doors. Classic stuff. Apparently, there are undead hordes introduced in a cutscene, and the reviewer finds them creepy. Alright then. Visually they're talking about monster highlights like three-headed dogs, Cerberus types, and vampire bats, which sounds pretty Castlevania. They mention some tricky platform sections, which is probably to be expected. They talk about skeletons that are a bit comical but also scary, inspired by Ray Harryhausen films, which is a nice touch. They're also mentioning undead suicide bomber types, which sounds a bit different. Apparently the 4-level cart they played was finished off with some concentrated button bashing. The game's fighting system is auto-targeting, which is probably for the best in 3D, and you can hack limbs off skeletons, which is always a laugh. The reviewer thinks Castlevania 64 is looking fantastic and action-packed with some RPG bits. They say there are puzzles and platforming and loads to collect. With playable characters, they think it could be one of the best games of 1999. Bit early to say that, isn't it? It's only December 1998 in this mag still. We were all hoping for a good 3D Castlevania back then, weren't we? They promise more on it in the new year. This page is having a look at Hybrid Heaven, which they're calling a big sci-fi adventure coming to the N64 next year, 1999 that is. The storyline sounds a bit mad if I'm honest. Something about this Johnny Slater geezer, a freelance gunslinger, and the president of the US being kidnapped by these gun-quashed hybrids. They mention this intro sequence that's 6.5 minutes long, which is a bit of a stretch, isn't it? Gameplay-wise, they're saying it's a clever mix of real-time fighting and menu choices, which is a bit different for a punch-up. Looks like you build up your power bar, then pick attacks from a menu. They've even got a little step-by-step guide to fighting, explaining about power and timing your attacks. Visually, it's your typical N64 stuff really, a bit blocky looking, but the combat screenshots seem alright, the menu system is clear enough. They reckon it's got a bit of a Mario vibe in terms of wandering around, but they've tried to make the levels less straightforward. Sounds like it might be worth keeping an eye on, even if the story seems a bit bonkers. Still early days though, only 40% finished they reckon. This page from N64 Mag is having a look at Hybrid Heaven. Looks like a bit of a brawler, RPG type thing. They're saying the script is good, and the fighting system is clever, despite being a bit confusing at first. They even have a little dig at Quest 64, saying Hybrid Heaven is better written, which, let's be honest, wasn't hard. Apparently you actually have to pay attention to the story to pick up clues, which is a novelty, innit? The reviewer reckons the fighting system is a mix of real-time battles and menu stuff, which sounds a bit odd, but they say it works. They even break down an example fight into steps, like Step 4, Attack, C, Step 5, Strike, and Step 6, Points. Seems like you gotta target specific body parts to weaken enemies, and you get points for how quickly you beat them, and how much stamina it took, and that helps you level up your stats like hit point, stamina, offense and defense, the usual stuff. They've got a few screenshots, one of some bloke with his kit off being told to put some clothes on by someone in a suit, and another with some alien-looking geezer outside some windows. Then there's the actual gameplay screens showing the combat, menus for moves and stat levels. The main issue they seem to have is the camera, comparing it to Goemon, saying it's fixed and a bit annoying when you're trying to move around quickly or climb over things. They reckon putting camera control on the C buttons would sort it right out. They mention it's due out next summer, summer 99, so still a bit of a wait to see if it's any good. But N64 Mag are getting an exclusive playtest, lucky sods. Looks like it's a Konami game, so could be alright. Heaven the Need for Breed is the tagline. Rick Hackler. But a bit weird, if you ask me. This page from N64 Magazine seems to be giving us a first look at Rayman 2, The Great Escape, which they're calling the first platformer to arrive in '99. Bit of a bold claim, eh? It's got that little game info box saying Ubisoft are behind it, and it's slated for spring '99 release, single player only. Well, that's fair enough for platformers back then. Warranty nor? Looking at the screenshots, it seems they're trying to show off a few different bits. There's Rayman jumping off a sinking pirate ship, dramatic stuff. Then there's a puzzle section, where you apparently have to knock some bloke off a ledge, clever. Another one shows Rayman letting rip with a projectile, they call it something nasty, charming. And then a spaceship section, where you're dodging fireballs. Oh, and look at that Rayman hitching a lift on what they reckon is a pool ball. Number 1 apparently. Very insightful. Charming. The writing underneath is all about how Pauline Jackie, the project leader, wanted to do something different. Apparently they thought Nintendo had the platform game thing sewn up, so they were aiming for something else. They mention it being close to Mario or Banjo in terms of exploration and puzzles, but taking a different approach. They bang on about the graphics being strong, clear and colourful, and having impressive draw distance. Well, it was N64, so it was all about pushing those polygons, wasn't it? They even mention water skiing behind an angry fish, and being chased by a spaceship, as examples of gameplay. Sounds a bit frantic, which was kind of the vibe they seemed to be going for back then. Fast-paced and in your face, innit? Frenetic is definitely the word, as they themselves say. All in all, it's looking like they're pretty hyped for Rayman 2. Reckon it's gonna be a bit of a looker, and something a bit different to the usual platforming fare we were used to. We'll see, won't we? The next page here we've got a bit of a future look at Rayman 2, The Great Escape for the N64. Looks quite colourful, doesn't it? They're calling it an ill-play array. Bit of a weird title for the preview, eh? Anyway, they're showing off some screenshots of Rayman in 3D, which is quite a step up from the old 2D games on the SNES, or SNES as some people called it. There's a section called Rocket Man, where they're talking about a level where Rayman has to use a rocket to get around. Apparently, you need to find a torch to light the rocket. Sounds a bit fiddly, but they say it controls like pilot wings, which, to be fair, wasn't too bad. They've got a picture of Rayman riding this rocket barrel thing. Looks a bit daft, but maybe fun. Bunsy. They mention it's got over 30 levels, proper linear-like, none of this hub nonsense that was becoming trendy at the time. They reckon it's a bit old school in that sense, relying on reactions and memory, like the games back in the 16-bit days. Fair enough. Sounds like they've got pickups and shortcuts in each level, and some uber boss bloke you can only reach if you collect everything. Standard stuff really. Apparently, the graphics are a strong point, clear and colourful, which you can see from the pictures. But they also mention the 3D camera is causing a bit of a headache to get right, which isn't surprising. 3D cameras were still a bit of a newfangled thing back then and could be a right pain. Yeah. And it seems like it was supposed to be out before Christmas, but they've had to push it back to after Christmas. So, typical then, always the way with these things. To be continued. Key. After Christmas it says, which is helpful. So yeah, Rayman 2, looking alright. If a bit delayed, we'll see how it turns out I suppose. This page from N64 Magazine, issue 22, dated December 22nd, 1998, it says here, looks like we're getting the bad news about Zelda 64, Ocarina of Time, being delayed again. Gone to November is the big headline, oh dear. They're saying Zelda's official UK release date is pushed back again, to November 27th apparently. Bit of a blow that, after all the hype. The article talks about how Nintendo of America confirmed the delay, and how it's supposed to be out in the UK, just 6 days after Japan and only 4 days after America. They're calling it almost simultaneous worldwide release, which is a bit of a stretch, but still, November it is. They mention it's been in development for ages, called Ultra 64 back in the day, and everyone's been waiting and waiting, and now we have to wait a bit longer. There are a couple of screenshots of Zelda, looking very nice, showing Link in what looks like Hyrule Field and some sort of dungeon area. One caption says, look at the size of this, Struth. ONK's a bit though, doesn't it? Pooh. A bit cheeky. And another one says the best console game in the world ever is almost here. Skill. They're definitely building up the anticipation. On the left side of the page there's the usual magazine staff list. James Ashton is the editor, and there are folks like Will Overton, Tim Weaver and a few others listed as deputy and production editors, designers and all that. Advertising and production contacts are also listed with phone and fax numbers and email addresses. Bit old school now innit? There's also subscription info, and the this issue on sale and next issue on sale dates Friday the 30th of October and Thursday the 26th of November. So plenty of Zelda buzz, even if it's delayed, keeping us hanging on. This page has a few bits and bobs. At the top there are some shortcuts, quick news pieces. Interplay or after playtesters. Bit of free gaming if you don't mind a trip to Darkest Marlow. Eidos canned fighting farce over here. So if you wanted that beat 'em up you'd need to import it from the States. And Bandai are having another go at a game based on those big robots from Neon Genesis Evangelion. Sounds a bit like a beat 'em up too. Then there's a piece on Turok 2, Rocky Slips it's called. Seems it's been delayed a bit. Pushed back to around November or December. Apparently they scored it really high last month, 95%, blimey. But something about squeezing it onto the cartridges and production problems. Typical. Still, they reckon it'll be worth the wait. Next up is Purple Batch, all about a new purple Nintendo 64 bundle in America called Atomic Purple. Comes with a purple controller, a bit of a novelty I suppose. Costs $129.95, about 81 quid then. Finally, there's Ruling the World, talking about the games charts. F1 World Grand Prix came in at number 2, shifted 30,000 copies in its first week, not bad. Mission Impossible was 3rd, and WWF Warzone was 5th, and doing well on the N64 even though it's on PlayStation and Game Boy as well. They reckon with Turok 2 and V-Rally coming, the N64 will be doing alright for Christmas. This page from the mag is having a look at some of the latest goings on, and bits and bobs for the N64. Up top we've got a bit about gimmicks. Seems Eidos, who were pretty big at the time, have bought Crystal Dynamics, the guys behind that wisecracking gecko. They're hoping Gex 3 might make them some proper dosh after the first one. Then Activision are getting in on the Star Trek action. They've got the license for the next 10 years, covering Deep Space Nine and Next Generation films and all sorts. No N64 games announced yet though, but you never know, might see Captain Picard on the machine one day. Guy. Konami are giving away 10 record bags, proper leatherette ones for IS-SNES 8, and this new game Hybrid Heaven, which I think was meant to be a bit different. Bit random record bags for games, but hey, free stuff is free stuff. Looks like they've binned off the addresses of the winners from that Quake competition, literally, in a skip down the local tip. If you won and haven't got your prize, you might want to give them a shout. Gaffielli. Down in the fanzine farm bit, they're having a read of some of the bedroom-produced mags, proper old-school stuff. There's When I'm 64, issue 2 of that, seems to have a Zelda comic and some reviews. Then I'm Raji Game, apparently this one's a bit fruity, even got Princess Daisy on page 3. Blimey, they reckon the game tips are a bit odd too, something about eating your toenails, cheers for that. And finally Nam, which sounds like it's been dragged out of someone's attic, all about Nintendo stuff, GoldenEye and that. Over on the right, new goods, they're looking at some IS-98 TAT. There's a memory card, not one of those dodgy third-party ones that loses your data. Apparently this one's official Nintendo and proper reliable, even got a 92% rating, which is pretty good. And a sticker kit so you can stick IS-98 logos all over your controller, in case people didn't know you were into your virtual football. That got a 70%, not bad for a bit of sticky plastic. They reckon everyone should have the memory card, must be making a killing on those then. This page is taking a trip down memory lane with Jason Moore in Retro World, looking at some of the really old school handheld games from back in the day. It's funny how they say computer games were for boffins, and Michael Jackson was black. Bit cheeky, but that's how things were back then, I suppose. Rorindu. Anyway, they're talking about how gaming didn't actually start in the 80s, but even earlier in the 70s, with the Atari VCS and these pocket electronic toys. Apparently, LED handhelds were the big new thing, driven by toy companies like Palitoy, Parker, and Mattel. Technology was super basic then, nothing like arcade quality, but they reckon these little games were still alright to play. Games like MB's Simon and Parker's Merlin, remember them? They did alright if they were marketed properly apparently. Right. They've reviewed a few of these classics. First up is Wildfire by Parker, a pinball game, and they give it a decent 73% retro rating. They reckon it's groovy looking, all 70s style colors and lettering, and surprisingly addictive even with the basic gameplay. Then there's Missile Invader by Bandai, getting a whopping 91% retro rating. Space Invaders was massive obviously, and this is a handheld version. Simple graphics but still playable, although they say it's really easy to beat, which isn't great. Oh no. Koi no. Next is Cue Ball, also by Parker, snooker or pool basically. 85% retro rating for this one. Released around 1980, it's a bit after the initial LED craze, but follows the same style. No fancy graphics, but apparently the ball movement is surprisingly good for what it is. Finally, there's Autorace by Mattel. This one's from 1978, super basic tiny screen, but it's got bright red stickers and space age lettering, which sounds quite something. You control a car that's actually drawn onto the screen, and slide a control left and right. Cars are just red dots moving in lanes, proper simple stuff. Great, it's interesting to see them looking back at these now, considering what we're playing on the N64 at the time. Shows how far things have come, doesn't it? Right at the bottom you've got the Nintendo 64 logo and star shot, with "Watch this space, wonder what that was all about." This page in N64 Magazine issue 22 gives us a sneak peek at the upcoming South Park game for the N64. Following in the mighty footsteps of GoldenEye, Iguana's South Park is being bigged up as far superior to the cartoon, which is a bold claim, isn't it? They reckon the game animation is better than the original series, which, let's be honest, wasn't exactly Disney in the animation department back then. It mentions South Park's growing popularity in the UK after its Channel 4 debut. Apparently the game's a first-person 3D adventure, using some of the tech from Turok 2, and features 6 episodes where you're tasked with saving South Park from all sorts. A comet, aliens, and even a turkey farm revolt. Sounds like classic South Park lunacy, doesn't it? There's a 4-player mode with game types like Grudge Match and Kick the Baby, charming as ever. You can play as the usual suspects: Kyle, Stan, Cartman, Kenny, and even some of the more colorful characters like Big Gay Al and Mr. Garrison. The weapons are promised to be suitably bonkers, including a cow launcher and a sniper rifle. They even highlight the cows as a running gag from the cartoon. Looking at the screenshots, we've got Big Gay Al squaring off against Officer Barbrady. Nice shirt indeed. Another shot shows poor Kenny, clearly about to meet his maker again, with the caption, "Oh my god, they drew Kenny in 3D. And another with some robot enemies. And the comment, "Now that's what we call quality robot action, so very IKEA." Bit of a dig maybe. The reviewer seems a little unsure how the South Park humor will translate into a game format, but they are definitely intrigued. They mention hundreds of recorded voice samples, and that it's toned down a bit from the sweary cartoon, making it perhaps less embarrassing to play in front of your mum. It's penciled in for early '99. Also listed under this month including are a few other games like Rat Attack, VR Pool 64, Vigilante 8, Winback, All-Star Tennis 99, Extreme G2, FIFA 99 and Quake 2. Quite a mixed bag for the N64, back in '98. This page is all about Vermin, which turns out to be Rat Attack for the N64. Blimey, Rats in space, eh? Apparently, these two lab rats, Washington and Jefferson, nicked a flying saucer and are now making copies of themselves using an alien machine to cause havoc. Sounds a bit daft, doesn't it? But in a Silberdits good kind of way, I suppose. You play as one of the Scratch Cats, Smokey, Manx, Sparky, Bobcat, Pearl and Muffy DuPont. Muffy DuPont? Really? Anyway, your job is to round up these rats with some sort of vaporizer. It's described as a multiplayer game. A bit like Bomberman, back when Bomberman was actually good. Bacchus. Looking at the screenshots, it seems you drag a square around the rats to catch them, a bit like using paint on your PC. There are different types of super rats too. Vampire, mouth, genius, devil, or jelly. Jelly rat? What next? Custard rat? One screenshot shows two-player cat action, apparently totally illegal. Cheeky. Another has a comment about falling in a pit and being sorry, and another about space hoppers and toy bricks. Looks a bit random but typical N64 weirdness from back then. Overall, it sounds like it could be a bit of a laugh with mates, but probably not one you'd be raving about for years. Still, rats in space, you've got to admire the sheer bonkersness of it all. This page in N64 Magazine, issue 22, it's all about VR Pool 64. Potluck, they call it. A bit naff, isn't it? VR Pool 64. They're saying pool's the most sedate sport you can get on the N64. Mentioning Japanese games like Mahjong and Pachinko, but for us lot, it's pool apparently. There's a bunch of screenshots. Looks alright for back then. Apparently it's a proper pool simulator, with every type of pool game you can think of. 8-ball, 9-ball, and all that malarkey, even American pool. You can fiddle with the table size and pockets, and it keeps your stats, which is fair enough. Celeris, the developers, tried to make the physics good. Runs at 640 by 480, with decent lighting, and uses the analog stick for the cue, and the rumble pack to simulate the crack when you hit the balls. They reckon it might be a bit niche, but they remember Jimmy White's Whirlwind Snooker being alright on the Amiga, so maybe VR Pool 64 will be a decent time waster this winter. November release apparently. First picks, they're calling it, showing off virtual bar stools too. Pool on the N64, eh? Wonder if anyone actually bought it. This page we're having a look at Vigilante 8 for the N64. Looks like Activision are trying to get in on the Twisted Metal craze. Reckon it's going to be a straight port from the PlayStation though. Not sure that's a great idea, mind you. They're saying it'll use the RAM expansion pack for a better resolution. It's set in the 70s with dodgy gangs, and you're a vigilante trying to stop them from causing trouble. Classic stuff. They're banging on about loads of vehicles and weapons, which is fair enough for this kind of game. They seem impressed with the graphics, saying they're lovely. 4-player mode is mentioned, which is always a laugh, isn't it? Looking. And on the right, blimey, what's this? A kangaroo in boxing gloves? Bit random, isn't it? Looks like an advert for space station Silicon Valley, another one from DMA Design, those guys who did Lemmings and Body Harvest. Holds no punches is the tagline. Looks a bit bonkers, but hey, that's what the N64 is all about really, isn't it? This page in N64 Magazine features a preview for a game called Winback. Looks like Koei are behind this one, and it's slated for April 99 in Japan. No idea when we'll get it over here though, probably ages knowing our luck. Apparently this spy sim was supposed to be out in Japan already, but it got delayed, which they say is a good thing as it's given them time to add a 2-player battle mode. Good thinking, because let's be honest, multiplayer is where it's at, especially on the N64. Boring to know already. They've detailed a few different 2-player game types, like your standard deathmatch, naturally. Then there's Lethal Tag, which sounds a bit different, a strategic power-up collecting game. Cube Hunt is described as a kind of treasure hunt, and Quick Draw is your basic target practice for sharpening your shooting skills, probably like all those skills we honed playing GoldenEye and Perfect Dark back in the day. The screenshots, well, they're a bit dark, aren't they? Looks like typical late 90s graphics, a bit blocky, but I suppose that's to be expected. There's a chap who seems to be the main character, Jean-Luc Cougar, and his partner Mike Hawkins, and some bad guys called Mad Hunter Leon and Death Mask Ashbit. Over the top names if you ask me. They reckon there will be bonus characters and arenas to unlock by playing the single-player game. Overall, they seem quite keen, saying it's one to look forward to. We'll see, won't we? Looks alright, could be a decent laugh with mates in multiplayer, but let's not get too carried away just yet, eh? This page features a bit of a split personality, doesn't it? On the left we've got All-Star Tennis 99 for the N64. They're going on about the realistic graphics from Ubisoft, saying it's more of a proper simulation than those arcade tennis games we were used to. Apparently they've got real-life tennis stars in it, names like Richard Krajicek, Conchita Martinez, and Jana Novotná, Wimbledon winners no less. Each of them has their signature moves and all that, which is a bit fancy. They even threw in some made UP players to keep things interesting, and reckon you can play with up to 4 people. Sounds like a decent enough tennis game for its time, if you were into that sort of thing, but tennis games never really set the world on fire, did they? Then on the right hand side, completely different vibe, we've got this full page ad for Silicon Valley on the PlayStation. Crikey, what's that supposed to be? A tank with a turtle shell and a cannon sticking out, and these beady little eyes staring out from the darkness above. Takes no prisoners, it says. A bit dramatic, isn't it? Silicon Valley logo at the bottom, looks a bit out there. Quite a contrast to the tennis game. One's all polite and sporty, the other's promising some sort of weird turtle tank warfare. Typical late 90s gaming, bit of everything going on. This page from N64 Magazine, issue 22, looks like it's bang on about RPG news, and it's all about Ogre Battle 3, Person of Lordly Calibre. Right, so the article starts off a bit poncy, saying the noble art of RPG naming has reached new heights thanks to Quest. Sounds a bit much for my taste, but each to their own. Apparently, this Ogre Battle 3 is coming to the N64, and is supposed to be a proper strategy RPG, like a D&D throwback, you know? They're saying it's a follow-up to the Super Famicom Ogre Battle, and the PlayStation game in between. Person of Lordly Calibre is a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? They're chatting about character alignments, lawful, chaotic, neutral and all that. And get this, tarot cards apparently decide your character's alignment at the start of each battle. Sounds a bit complicated, but then again that's RPGs for you. Rata. Graphically, it's sprites on 3D backgrounds apparently, which they reckon means loads of soldiers on screen at once. The battle system is turn-based, old school style. There's a screenshot showing off the battle map. Looks a bit retro, like those old strategy games, but I suppose that's the point. Another screenshot shows what seems to be army management. Warrington mention you have to arrange your army properly, and that you can resize the map. The Japanese version is supposed to be really hard to understand, which isn't a shock, is it? They're saying no expense has been spared on the special effects. We'll see about that when it actually comes out. It's got little captions like, "We like the look of the decor in here," pointing to a screenshot, which is a bit of a random comment, and "arranging an army the lordly way" next to another. So yeah, Ogre Battle 3 for the N64. Sounds like it could be a bit of alright if you're into that sort of thing. Proper deep strategy, RPG. We'll have to see if anyone bothers to translate it properly for us Brits. They mention someone assuming someone converts it, so who knows. This page has got a preview of Extreme G2, or XG2 as they're calling it, from Acclaim. Right there on the left you've got this very 90s looking futuristic woman in silver, very of its time. It's a racing game, and they're saying it's coming out in November, so this must have been getting ready for the Christmas rush on the N64. Cucus. They're comparing it to F-Zero X and Wipeout, the big dogs of futuristic racers back then. Says Acclaim isn't too worried about the competition, reckon XG2 is more of a traditional racer than those other slide-about games. They bang on about the 13 new bikes that flex and bounce. Sounds a bit much, doesn't it? Apparently you can break the sound barrier, which is always a laugh. They're making a point that this one feels more solid than the first Extreme G, and that battle mode is better. Apparently the first one was a bit aimless, just driving around in tanks, whereas now they've got proper bikes and the computer racers are smarter and more aggressive, trying to gang up on you. There are 12 tracks, each with a few routes and shortcuts, which sounds decent. There are a few screenshots dotted about, showing the in-game graphics. You can see bits of the track, the speedometers, lap times, and little comments boxes next to each screenshot, giving you a bit of flavor. One says the tracks are narrow with deadly drops, another is about jumps, and one mentions the light trails on the bikes look good. Another one is comparing a track to the Channel Tunnel, but with bikes and shooting, which is a bit of a strange comparison. Looks like they reckon it's worth keeping an eye on when it comes out next month to see how it stacks up. There's a "Played It" sticker slapped on it, so they must have had a decent go on it. All in all, it's a preview hyping up XG2 as a solid futuristic racer to watch out for on the N64. This page is a preview of FIFA 99 on the N64. It's looking pretty good actually. They've got a few screenshots dotted about, showing off some action on the pitch. Looks like they've got all sorts of camera angles now, which is a nice touch. One picture even shows a player taking a bit of a dive. Look at that, he's taking a dive in the area, it says. Cheeky. Another one shows a player doing an overhead kick. Nice overhead kick there, Jim Bob's son. Bit daft but adds a laugh. The review itself talks about it being an updated version of the engine from the last FIFA game, and it's coming out in March '99. They're saying it's got all the official stuff, proper team names, kits and all that jazz, and loads of leagues: European Super League, Champions League, UEFA Cup, Cup Winners' Cup. Blimey, sounds like they've crammed everything in. They reckon it's going to be trickier and more skillful than before, and hopefully they've sorted out those dodgy controls they had back in the Mega Drive days. Remember those delay frustrations? They're saying it's got a better passing system and new features to tempt folks to upgrade from the last one. Sounds like they're trying to milk it, hence the big milk it title I suppose, but then again, it's FIFA, it always sells like hotcakes, doesn't it? They'll bring us more news as they get it, apparently. Fair enough. This page right then, it's all about Quake 2 for the N64, labelled as Strog Stuff, which sounds about right if you remember the enemies from the game. They're showing off a few screenshots, those gruesome Strog blokes, and the first-person view of the game itself. They're saying it's got improved graphics from the first one on PC, which was a relief, because, let's be honest, the N64 needed to show it could do proper 3D shooters. They're banging on about new weapons like hand grenades and the BFG, which, yeah, you'd expect in a Quake game. Warranters. Then there's a bit at the top called an ear to the ground, which is all rumour and gossip about other games coming out. Carmageddon is mentioned, apparently toned down for Nintendo, which was hardly surprising given all the fuss it caused with running over people even if they were supposed to be zombies this time. Lode Runner 64 and 40 Winks get a mention too. 40 Winks sounds a bit kooky, about dreams and nightmares and rescuing spirits. Not entirely sure what to make of that one. They also mention Contra 64, and Worms 2, coming to the N64. Worms 2 on the 64-bit could be a laugh with rocket launchers and banana bombs. Always good for a bit of multiplayer madness. They're saying Quake 2's multiplayer wasn't playable in the version they saw, but they were hoping for 4-player deathmatch, which would have been the dream back then. Overall, Quake 2 sounds like it could be decent on the N64 if they managed to get it running properly. This page kicks off with a piece called Go! Go! Peacemakers, which is all about the Japanese love for strategy games like Go, Shogi, and Mahjong. Apparently it's a massive deal over there, much bigger than just chess. The article reckons the Japanese are less keen on overt violence in games, and prefer more thoughtful stuff, mentioning Harvest Moon as an example, which back then was a bit of a quirky farming sim, not exactly Call of Duty. They even name-dropped Cho-Chi-kun, saying he's the top Go player in Japan but actually Korean. Bit of a random factoid. Then there's a section called Pretty in Print, and it's about the Game Boy Pocket printer, specifically a Pikachu Yellow edition. Apparently Nintendo released a special version so you could print out your Pokemon snaps from Pocket Monsters, which we knew as Pokemon over here of course. It mentions the embarrassment of having Pocket Monsters but no printer, a very 90s kid problem to have, eh? They say to check out the UK version of the Pocket Camera, and Pikachu's Yellow, probably meaning the Pocket Camera was also getting a Pikachu makeover at some point. There's a picture of the printer itself, bright yellow and everything, and a screenshot showing Pikachu wandering around in the game. Pretty basic graphics by today's standards mind you, but back then it was pretty neat to have a tiny printer for your Game Boy. This page then, it's having a look at Perfect Dark, which back then was touted as a super sequel to GoldenEye, bit of an exaggeration perhaps, but you know how magazines were. Apparently N64 Magazine managed to infiltrate Rare, dramatic stuff, to get these exclusive pictures. They're showing off some screenshots and making comments. One mentions using a scanner and riddling with bullets, classic. Another says it's Tomb Raidery, but without the, continent-sized breasts, bit cheeky from them. And they're going on about TIE Fighter boys, and no Churok-like blood effects, trying to set expectations I suppose. Sounds like they're trying to build hype for the opening levels, and this time travel thing. Perfect Dark, yeah, everyone was waiting for that one. This page from N64 Magazine, yeah, it's all about Perfect Dark, remember that one? Big deal at the time, being the follow-up to GoldenEye. Rare were really on top form back then, weren't they? Their biggest, most important game yet, the magazine blares. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Rare's Perfect Dark. Pretty dramatic stuff. Rare's Dark. So, it's a special investigation feature, talking about Joanna Dark, codename Perfect Dark, naturally. Apparently, she's the new James Bond, but, you know, a woman and in the future. 2023 according to the story so far bit. Seems she works for the Carrington Institute, proper mysterious spy organization, and they're looking into this Datadyne Corporation, billion-dollar dodgy dealings and all that. Aliens are involved too, naturally, and time travel apparently. Sounds a bit bonkers, doesn't it? They say it's like Blade Runner, Terminator and the X-Files all mashed together. Ambitious stuff. Warrington. The article mentions that the GoldenEye team, a bunch of noobs at the time apparently, were behind this too. They talk about GoldenEye being a massive hit, and how Perfect Dark is meant to be even better, bigger, bolder. Stealth, violence and brains. That's what they're promising. There's a bit called Cut Above which mentions cutscenes, just like GoldenEye, and Joanna Dark's changing outfits. They say she's dressed for every occasion. Tasty. They even write, bit much isn't it? Anyway, Perfect Dark Rare N64. Summer '99 release in the US, Summer '99 here too I presume, 1 to 4 players. Yeah, everyone was pretty hyped for this back then, thinking it was going to be the next big thing after GoldenEye. Good times. This page right then is a bit of a spread on Perfect Dark, eh? Dark Life it's called, and it's having a look at what we can expect from Rare's next big shooter on the N64. They're really pushing the futuristic, alien vibe, saying it's chock full of new enemies, and they're even making comparisons to GoldenEye, saying the henchmen are like Bond villains and foot soldiers are unlike Star Wars TIE fighter pilots. Bit of a strange mix that. It's broken down into sections, Datadyne Foyer and Datadyne Roof, showing off some in-game screenshots. In the foyer, they're pointing out the ammo bars, which are supposed to vary depending on the weapon, and saying you just walk over ammo to pick it up, just like in GoldenEye. Then there's something about your life bar, and how Joanna takes damage, a bit more realistic than Bond taking loads of bullets apparently. They even mention using the skylight to escape the foyer, so it sounds like they're pushing the level design and progression aspect. Then onto the roof section, showing where you end up after the foyer. They say there's a bridge between the foyer and rooftop. And then a cheeky bit about headshots, saying you can wander up to enemies and pop them in the back of the head just like in GoldenEye. Seems like they're really hammering home the GoldenEye connection to get us interested, aren't they? With very big AK-47s they mention as well, sounds like they're trying to ramp up the action compared to GoldenEye 2. All in all, it's looking like Perfect Dark is shaping up to be the next big thing on the N64, as if we needed telling after GoldenEye. This page is a special investigation feature from N64 Magazine, December 98 issue, all about Perfect Dark. It's focusing on the Datadyne interior environments, giving us a sneak peek at what to expect in the game. They're really pushing the boat out on the explosions apparently, saying they are like GoldenEye, but if you get too close it's bad for your health, which seems fairly obvious, doesn't it? One of those Datadyne soldiers gets a taste of grenade fire. They're keen on the new targeting system too. Sounds fancy, a square with lines that converge when you lock on and the box flashes. Not sure I totally get it from the description, but hopefully it'll make sense in game. They also bang on about how realistic the Datadyne complex is, and it does look pretty good to be fair. Even back then. Stairs, elevators, windows, apparently all the buildings in the game could physically exist. Bit of a reach maybe, but alright. And then there's talk of Prologic surround sound for a sense of where bullets are coming from. That was getting to be a big thing on consoles then. Proper surround sound. Finally, they mention death animations, or lack of them, currently using GoldenEye's ones, but Rare are recording new, excruciatingly painful death scenes. Sounds a bit grim, even for a shooter, doesn't it? There's also a little box out called Shot in the Dark, musing about Joanna Dark's background. British, American, Dutch Romanian? They're all over the place. Her age is a mystery, background is misty. The only thing they seem certain of is she might be wandering around Datadyne in a crop top and short shorts. Bit cheeky that, even for N64 Mag. Or at least, we hope not, they finish with. Right then. Slightly odd way to sell a game if you ask me, but there you go. This page at N64 Magazine, right, is having a look at Perfect Dark, which at the time was the game we were all waiting for, after GoldenEye 007 blew our socks off. It's got a special investigation vibe going on, focusing on the alien bits of the game. So it's shouting aliens, in big letters, and talking about kidnapping, killing. Apparently in Perfect Dark you play Joanna Dark, and you're tasked with sneaking into a top-secret Datadyne research base to nick an alien specimen. Sounds about right for Rare at the time, pushing the boat out. They've got screenshots dotted around, showing some of the alien bits, like pushing an alien out of the labs, and using an alien carrier as a shield. Typical Rare humor, in it. They even mention picking off aliens, with AK-47s. Lovely. It's all very tongue-in-cheek. Then they've got a section called Other Worlds. This is showing off different level themes beyond just the usual Datadyne stuff. There's the labs, which sounds like your typical sci-fi experimentation place. Bunker is described as a huge industrial complex, probably dark and gritty, as you'd expect. Neo-Egyptian is a weird one, futuristic pyramid, bit like Stargate apparently, so that's different. And then Japan, which they're calling Blade Runner inspired, with sushi bars, neon acid rain moody they say. Sounds like they are throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks, which is what we loved Rare for back then. Finally there's a things we know bit at the bottom. They're banging on about acoustic shadowing lighting, which makes things look deep, comparing it to Unreal on the PC, so it must be fancy. Textures are supposed to be 10 times better than GoldenEye. Ambitious stuff. Prologic sound is mentioned, meaning surround sound if you had the setup, hearing doors opening in the distance, echoing footsteps, that kind of thing. They also mention you can pick up and drag objects, like the alien on a trolley, to use as a shield again, classic Rare. Explosive charges to blow holes in walls to make new doorways, that's a bit nifty too. And apparently there's only one vehicle section so far, the hoverbike, and they're not totally convinced by it. N64 Magazine, being ever so slightly reserved in their hype. Overall though, it's looking like Perfect Dark was shaping up to be something pretty special, as we all suspected it would be. This page delves into the exciting world of Perfect Dark, which was still quite a way off back in December '98. They're giving us a sneak peek at some level themes, mentioning shipwreck, sounding a bit like aliens underwater, and civilization, which takes Joanna back to ancient times, judging by the screenshots of some temple ruins. Then there's a section called Extras, showing off some gadgets. The hoverbike sounds like a smaller version of the tank from GoldenEye, handy for causing a bit of mayhem on the roads apparently. And the scanner, which is a clever bit of kit that tells you how dangerous enemies are before you get too close, which sounds rather useful on those harder levels. They've got a perfect choice section where they're asking readers what they'd like to see in Perfect Dark, and it's quite amusing to read what folks suggested back then. James is all about fixing clipping issues and wants proper deathmatch arenas. Fair enough, we all hated getting stuck on doors. Will is after non-linear missions, wanting to explore levels in his own way, not just following a set path, which is a good point. Tim wants more spy stuff and a decent storyline, and he's right, it's not just about shooting everything. Martin is all about the gore, wanting blood and homing missiles. A bit bloodthirsty perhaps. And Andrea Brilla. Well, Andrea's suggestions are certainly, well, unique. Let's just say they're hoping for more realistic enemy reactions, and maybe a wardrobe change for Joanna Dark. Right then, they're wrapping up by asking for even more reader ideas to send in, either by post or email, to N64 Magazine in Bath. Good times. This page in N64 Arena, right, is all about game reviews for the N64, and it looks like they're talking about driving games mostly. They're banging on about how many driving games are coming out for the N64, which was quite true at the time, wasn't it? They've got a picture of V-Rally 99 looking all moody, with some snow effects. V-Rally, yeah, I remember that series. It was alright, not exactly Gran Turismo, but, you know, N64 needed races. Yeah. Then they've got this guide to scoring, which is a bit of a laugh, really. They're saying because N64 games are so pricey, they really play them properly before giving them a score and a Star Game medal. Very generous of them. So anything above 85% is top-notch, Star Game material, and worth buying apparently. Then you've got 84% to 70%, which is still supposed to be really good games you should consider adding to your collection. Below that, 69% to 50% is where things get a bit average, playable but nothing special. 49% to 20% is for the lazy programming and rushed jobs, and anything below 19% is just a disaster. The disaster zone, they call it. Bit harsh maybe, but that's magazines for you. Always gotta have an opinion. It's all pretty standard magazine review stuff really, just their way of justifying why they bother reviewing games. This page right then is a classic bit of N64 magazine fodder from back in '98. At the top you've got a load of game titles crammed in, typical previews and reviews I reckon. Silicon Valley sounds a bit bonkers with exploding turds, whatever that's about. Then there's your usual suspects like WCW vs NWO Wrestling, Starshot Space Circus Fever, catchy title that, F-Zero X, Rakuga Kids, which apparently the UK's getting, NHL 99 for the ice hockey fans, Gasp, which is some dodgy fighter apparently, and something called Import Arena and NASCAR 99, all vying for your attention and page-turning fingers. Below that, there's a How It Works bit explaining their review scores. Visuals, sounds, mastery, lifespan and verdict, the usual breakdown, nothing too surprising there. They're basically saying visuals are about the graphics on the N64, sounds are about the music and effects, mastery is how well you can get to grips with the game, and lifespan is how long it'll keep you hooked before you get bored and trade it in. Verdict is just the overall score, how much fun it is really. Worry. Then you've got Team 64, supposed to be their expert reviewers. Seems like they've got a bunch of them, giving their little snippets about games and picking their game of the month. James Lerner Ashton is banging on about his driving test and V-Rally 99, Will Overton's talking about F-Zero X and sounding a bit odd. Tim Weaver is on Body Harvest and mentions animals not swearing, which is a relief I suppose. Martin Kitts thinks Silicon Valley is utterly psychotic, which might be a good thing going by the turd comment earlier. Justin Webb's on NFL Blitz, and seems to be having some initiation at work. Eto. On the other side, Paul Jarrell is laughing at James about his driving test and is on Gasp. Andrea Ball's talking sheep and WCW vs NWO. Jess Bickham is doing some weird pirate impression for Rakuga Kids. James Price sounds miserable about NHL 99. And Mark Green is worried about getting stoned by James and Tim while reviewing NASCAR 99. Charming bunch. Each of them has picked a game of the month, which seems like a bit of fun, but who knows if they actually mean anything by it. All in all, it's a snapshot of what they were playing and thinking about at the time. A bit of banter thrown in for good measure. Typical mag stuff really. This page in N64 Mag is having a look at V-Rally. Right then, V-R-A-L, big letters as you can see. They're reminding us about a V-Rally 99 special investigation from the last issue, which sounds intriguing, probably just some preview or something. So the page is all about gameplay tips really, and little snippets of what to expect. One tip is about facing the wrong way and expecting the computer cars to avoid you. Apparently that's a mistake. Good to know. There are a few screenshots dotted around, showing off the game. One has a blue car. Looks like it's maybe on a dirt track with some flamingos in the background. Quite random. Another is a red car, driving along a beach road, palm trees and people. Very scenic. Then there's a snowy scene in another screen. It's trying to show off the different environments, I suppose. Very scene. There are little caption boxes next to some of the screenshots. One mentions the flamingos and how they don't seem to care about your impending crash. That's a bit of a laugh. Another one says if the roads were wider we'd all scream less, implying the roads are a bit narrow and unforgiving then. And lastly there's a comment about the in-car view being for purists, meaning it's probably harder to play but more authentic, as you'd expect. Yeah, just a page giving you a taste of V-Rally, back when rally games were still pretty decent on the N64, before they all got a bit samey, wasn't it? This page is about V-Rally 99 for the N64, blimey. Seems like ages ago now, doesn't it? It's a review in N64 Magazine, and it's got that Star Game Award slapped on it, so must be decent, eh? Warrington Nye. The reviewer is having a bit of a laugh, warning folks that this game can seriously damage your sanity. Sounds about right for some of these racing games back then, they could be proper tough. They're on about how easy it is to crash and end up in a right mess, mentioning ending up in a hedge and all sorts. They reckon if you drive too fast in real life, V-Rally 99 shows you what a bad idea that is. Probably end up needing a hospital stay by the sounds of it. They're comparing it to the PlayStation version, saying the N64 one is better, because when you crash it puts you back on the track quicker. Apparently on the PlayStation you could spin out for ages, letting all your mates get miles ahead. Little digs at the PlayStation, typical. Yay, there's a bit of info about the game, like it's from Infogrames, and it was out on the 28th of November. Probably in 98, looking at the December date at the bottom. Costs 40 quid, which was a fair bit back then. Needs the controller pack for saving and rumble pack for shaking about, naturally. Jagetti. Loads of screenshots dotted about showing off the game. Snowy tracks, dusty tracks, cars flipping over, all the usual rally chaos. They say it's like the Formula 1 game of rally driving. Very grown up and difficult. Reckon it's got the potential to be the best racing game on the N64. Drive on, they say at the end. Cheeky. This page from N64 Mag is having a look at V-Rally for the N64. Right then, what's in the box? Well, they're telling us that V-Rally is packed with stuff to do, which is good because some racing games back then were a bit thin on content, weren't they? They're saying you won't finish it in an afternoon, which is probably true if you're not glued to it for hours, unlike some of us were back in the day. Then it goes into arcade mode. Apparently you just hammer the A button, and you're off in a Ford Escort, straight into the first stage. Sounds like they're trying to make it feel a bit like proper rallying but more arcadey. It mentions racing against other cars, not just time trials, which is always better for a bit of competition, isn't it? They talk about caffeine-fueled sales reps with road rage, chasing contracts. Bit dramatic, but you get the idea. It's supposed to be aggressive racing. Beating the first arcade mode unlocks the second one, and so on, up to the third. Each level has more courses and trickier weather, naturally. There's a little picture showing the level select screen. Very basic stuff for the time, but it did the job. And another showing the race in progress, looking quite colourful for the N64. Fourth on the grid, but that's not a problem, the caption says. Cheeky. You'll need plenty of practice to see much of this screen. Is under another picture, showing a congratulations you finished first screen. Probably not wrong there. Next up is time trial. They're calling it a bit superfluous, which is a fancy word, isn't it? Basically they reckon it's a bit pointless because most of the game is about racing against the clock anyway. But they say it's good for practicing the tracks that give you grief in the championship mode. Ghost car helps, apparently. Key thing is less about perfect racing lines and more about not crashing. Sound advice for most of us back then, and probably still now, to be honest. There's a screenshot of the time trial menu, looks straightforward enough, and another shot of a race with the ghost car visible. The intermediate behind the car view is in all honesty the easiest to get to grips with, they say, showing a picture of that view. And finally, there's a jump just around this corner. You have to brake for it or you end up in a hedge. Another helpful tip, goo. So yeah, that's V-Rally. Seemed like a decent enough racer at the time, probably worth a look if you were into your rally games on the N64. This page from N64 Magazine back in December 98 is all about V-Rally 99. It's part of their N64 Arena section. The main bit they're going on about is the championship mode, saying it's the main event with races across 8 countries and over 24 stages. Apparently it's trying to be like the proper World Rally Championship, mentioning Colin McRae and Tommy Mäkinen, those rally legends, and how the game mixes up the tracks with weather and daylight changes, even turning some into one-lap sprints. They point out you're always racing against the clock, just like a real rally, and it compares your times to the computer drivers at checkpoints, which was pretty neat back then for keeping an eye on how you were doing. Then there's a section called Banging Tunes, which is a bit of a weird title, but it's about tuning your car. They're saying you can tweak things like oversteer and understeer, and suspension settings and gear ratios to suit the race, which is all about getting the setup just right. They reckon setting the gears to short helps with acceleration, but sacrifices top speed, useful for tougher courses. Lastly, they touch on the 2-player mode, saying it's available in split screen, either vertical or horizontal, and they'd go for horizontal any day. It's head-to-head arcade style, with a couple of computer cars thrown in for extra chaos. They mention there are loads of options, even unlimited distance, which sounds a bit mad, but they do admit that while the 2-player is decent, it doesn't quite have the same feel as the single player, and you'll probably spend more time in the time trial, arcade or championship modes for serious racing. Fair enough really, it's V-Rally, not exactly Mario Kart for multiplayer thrills, is it? This page in the mag is having a look at V-Rally on the N64, right? It's calling it not just a pretty race, which is a fair point. Games back then were starting to look quite fancy, weren't they? So first off, they're wondering how many tracks there actually are. Seems like they reckon about 24 proper tracks, even though you might see more stages if you count all the different weather and time of day versions. Still, 24 tracks on the N64, that's not bad going, is it? Especially when most races are decent length, not just quick 30-second dashes like some other games. Proper white-knuckle stuff, they're saying. Palta. Then they're showing off a couple of the stages. First up is night driving in Spain. Looks quite atmospheric, all dark with just your headlights on. They reckon the lighting effects are swish, and that the game lights up the scenery based on where you're pointing, which is pretty impressive. Although they do say the headlights could be a bit stronger, they suggest trying out the interior view for this stage, which could be cool. Taya. Next, it's Winter Wonderland in Sweden. Total contrast, all bright and snowy. They're saying grip is non-existent in the snow, which sounds about right for a rally game, doesn't it? And it's all very Christmassy, especially with snow falling in the game. They even spotted a reindeer in the background. Bit cheeky though, they're having a laugh at the spectators, saying they've got scale problems, meaning they're a bit too big compared to everything else. Overall, it's sounding like V-Rally is a decent looking racer, and it's got some proper length tracks, not just short circuits. Looks like they're impressed with the graphics for the time, especially the weather effects and lighting. Not too shabby for the old N64, eh? This page in N64 Magazine must be from around Christmas '98, I reckon. It's got a piece on V-Rally '99 for the N64. Looks like they're giving a bit of a right seat driver guide, which is handy for rally games when you're trying to figure out what the co-driver is on about. They've got 2 courses featured, Play Misty in the Alps, which sounds a bit dodgy with foggy weather, and Setting Sun in Corsica, which sounds a bit more like it in the sunshine, though they do warn you not to look at the sunset. Bit of a silly warning that, but I suppose you could crash if you were too busy admiring the view. The reviewer is talking about the pace notes and how they are essential, and sometimes wrong in V-Rally. Sounds like they've had a few hairy moments with dodgy calls from the co-driver, which we all have I suppose in these rally games. They also mention a secret section, where they are having a laugh about complaints of giving away too many game secrets in reviews. And they're teasing a secret for V-Rally '99. Something about 4 wheels and championship mode. Not giving much away there, are they? All in all, looks like a decent preview, talking about the game's features, and a few tips for getting started in V-Rally '99. Must have been a good one for its time. Rallying games were always a bit of alright back then. This page in N64 Magazine has got a feature on V-Rally for the N64. Apparently those Eden Studios chaps who are new to the N64 have had a proper job squeezing V-Rally onto the cartridge. They've managed to get all the tracks in, and it's even faster than the PlayStation version, and the handling is supposed to be pretty spot on. But there's a bit of pop-up which is a bit of a downer. The review mentions you might see bits of the scenery appearing in the distance, especially on stages like Corsican Rally with those high walls. Doesn't sound ideal, but they reckon it's not too bad, and doesn't ruin the game. They also say it's not as polished looking as F0X or F1 World Grand Prix, visually speaking. The article bangs on about how massive the game is for an N64 title, a proper behemoth. Apparently a big feather in Infogrames' cap to get so much content crammed in. It's got loads of tracks and a good lifespan, plus an arcade mode with really tough computer races. Successive championships change things up with fog and nighttime racing to make it harder. They reckon it can be a bit tricky, especially when visibility is poor. There are a few screenshots dotted about, one showing a car a bit sideways, captioned, "A prime example of getting your car crossed up." Another one says, "Plump for the Skoda. It's not a bad car, honest." And another showing brake lights and reversing lights, which is a nice detail I suppose. There's also a car selection screen visible. Looks like you can choose from different rally cars like Skoda Octavia, Citroën Exozara, Nissan Almera and Peugeot 306 Maxi, Renault Megane and a Hyundai Coupe. Looks like a decent selection of kit cars. Overall, it sounds like they're impressed with the size and content of V-Rally on the N64, even if it's got a few graphical hiccups like pop-up. They're comparing it to F0X and F1 World Grand Prix, saying it's a bit tougher than those. Seems like a solid rally game for the N64 then. This page here is a review of V-Rally for the N64. Looks like it's from '98, judging by the N64 arena bit at the top. Right, V-Rally then. There are a few screenshots dotted about, showing off the graphics which, to be fair, for the N64 at the time, weren't half bad. One shot is in Kenya by the looks of it, dusty and sandy, another one's got some fog rolling in, atmospheric they were trying to be, bless 'em. And there's a classic in-game text box, "Hello, my name is Otto, and I am a big rally freak." Yes, charming stuff. The review itself reckons visually it's good when you're relying on headlights and fog lights, which sounds ominous. Apparently, every corner's a hair-tearing experience, which, in hindsight, could be true of a lot of rally games back then. They mention it's not a Formula 1 racer but more like Sega Rally, Daytona or Ridge Racer, all solid arcade titles to be fair, if a bit different in style. The reviewer goes on about arcade competitor nudging you and sending you into a death spin. Sounds about right for arcadey style racing, wasn't always the fairest, was it? They talk about memory packs for saving progress, remember those? Always worrying if you had enough space. Apparently it's a straight driving game and not as fiddly as F1 World Grand Prix, which is probably a good thing. Warrington. In the little boxes down the side they've rated it. Visuals gets a 7, reckons the smooth high speed is good but pop-up is annoying. Sounds is an 8, no complaints. Co-pilot speech 2, nice. Mastery also gets an 8, lots of tracks. Developers did a decent job. Lifespan gets a 9, plenty to keep you coming back, even 2-player mode. And verdict is a 90%, says it's not perfect but it's a leader in the field and deserves recognition. Pretty generous score, 90% back then was top marks really. Overall, sounds like a decent rally game for the N64, probably worth a punt if you were into your races at the time. This page in N64 Magazine is shouting about a competition to win a brand new Peugeot 106 Quicksilver. 10 grand's worth of car, just for being good at V-Rally. Britain's V-Rally champion they're calling it, a bit over the top. But hey, a free car is a free car. So what you gotta do is record your fastest time in V-Rally's arcade mode, video it on a blank tape, remember those days? And send it in. Sounds easy enough, but knowing my skills on V-Rally, I reckon I'll be sticking to the bus. But for someone decent at the game, it's a proper prize. They're pushing issue 23, coming out on the 26th of November, as that's when you get the official entry form, and some expert tips on how to get faster times. Sneaky way to sell more mags, innit? V-Rally 99 is mentioned on sale too, so I guess that's the version they're on about. Helidor. The competition's running from late November through to February, with the winner announced in March. Got to have a video of all stages, no cheats, and you need to be a UK resident with a PLN64 and a copy of V-Rally. No cash alternative for the Peugeot, and you'll need a driving license to actually claim the motor. All the usual rules, but blimey, a car as a prize for playing a game? Back then, that was pretty massive. This page features a look at Space Station Silicon, and blimey, it's certainly got a unique visual style going on. We've got this fella with the massive specs perched on top of a pink elephant, which is definitely something you don't see every day, or ever for that matter. Apparently they were going on about it back in issues 18 and 20, so it seems they've been teasing this one for a bit. Looking at the screenshots, we've got the classic blurry N64 graphics, but it looks like there's some varied environments, waterfalls, lakes and all that. One screenshot mentions mosquito in amber, which sounds a bit odd, doesn't it? The other one says, swing, monkey swing, so who knows what sort of game this actually is. Freaky animals is also mentioned in one caption, which is never a bad thing I suppose if you like that sort of thing. It's issue 22 of N64 Magazine, so we are getting deep into the console's life now, and it's interesting to see what sort of games they're pushing. Space Station Silicon is certainly memorable looking. Let's see if it plays as strangely as it looks. This page from the mag is all about Space Station Silicon Valley, or just Silicon Valley as they seem to be calling it mostly here, which was quite a weird and wacky game coming out on the N64 back in the day. It starts with a How It Works section, breaking down the gameplay in 5 steps. Basically, you're a disembodied microchip, Evo, wandering around a space station, and you have to find dead animals and possess them. Each animal has its own special abilities, which is how you get around and solve puzzles. Apparently, you'll need to switch between different animals to get through the levels and complete mission objectives. The levels are set across 4 different environments: European, Arctic, jungle, and desert. To get to the next level, you need to find all the collectibles in the previous ones, which sounds like a bit of a chore but typical for these sorts of games. There are a few screenshots dotted around. One shows this bloke in glasses saying the music is hip, which is a bit cringe in it. Another bit mentions that vultures are rare and ugly. Charming. They're pushing this game as a bit different, with self-replicating robots and parodies of early sci-fi. The reviewer seems to be quite taken with it, talking about building up an impressive collection of animals, and the funkiest lift music. Sounds like they're quite keen on this one, reckon it could be a bit of a laugh, especially with the dog's rocket launcher tagline. Very odd. Looks like it's retailing for £40, which was probably standard for a new N64 game back then. This page from N64 Magazine, harking back to '98, is all about animals of distinction in Silicon Valley. Remember that bizarre game? Yeah, the one where you could control different animals. Anyway, they've got a bit of a guide here on bagging yourself some of the wildlife for your virtual trophy room. They run through a few of the creatures you can find. First up, the parrot. Apparently it's a right pain to find in the jungle, loves a good dive bomb attack, and according to them even laughter won't kill it unless you've got a 12-bore handy. A bit dramatic, lads. Seems lava does the trick though, helpfully. They reckon a feather boa is the trophy to aim for from this one. Rarity of 5, kill difficulty of 3, and usefulness of 4. Not bad stats. Then there's the gorilla. Grab and lob and jump thump are its abilities. Catchy. Apparently good for making ashtrays or stuffed hands. Charming. Slow as a wet week, so keeping up with it shouldn't be a problem. Gorilla skull beer mug trophy for this one. Rarity 4, kill difficulty 2, usefulness 4. So easier to bag and just as useful as a parrot. Makes sense. Breckerman. Moving on to the desert fox. Hotshot and jump is its thing, and it sounds like it's packing heat, with cannons no less. They say it's a bit handy with those, so watch out. And apparently it's got it in for camels, kills them with extreme prejudice a bit much. Fur coat trophy from this chap. Rarity 3, kill difficulty 5, usefulness 5. So, harder to kill, and more useful than the others. Interesting. Borcha. Lastly, the racing tortoise. Shell attack and turbo are its skills. They admit it's not the prettiest thing, but it's a capable hunter. And immune to attacks when it's tucked in its shell. Crafty. Soup is the suggested trophy. Lovely. Rarity 4, kill difficulty 3, usefulness 4. Pretty average stats there then. So yeah, a quick look at some of the creatures in Silicon Valley, giving you a bit of info on how to hunt them, and what you can get as a prize. Typical N64 Mag stuff really. Bit of fun. This page in N64 Magazine back in '98 is having a bit of a laugh at some of the characters in what looks like a new game. We've got profiles of different enemies you'll be facing, starting with the King Rat. Apparently he's a bit pongy and surrounded by rat mates, and they reckon he's been eaten poo. Charming. The review has given him a rarity of 3, kill difficulty 3, and usefulness of 4, whatever that means. The suggested trophy is Weil's disease, which is a bit grim, isn't it? Kilty. Next up is the racing dog. This fella's got rocket launchers, bless him, and they reckon it's kinda to hack him to bits up close. Rarity 3 again, kill difficulty 4, and usefulness is a top-notch 5. The trophy? A lucky dog's paw. Then there's the sheep. Floaty hop and bar is its ability, and they're saying it's useless and relies on a ram for defense, and the horns aren't much good for a trophy. Poor sheep. Rarity 2, kill difficulty is a joke at 1, but usefulness is a decent 4. Woolly winter underpants is the trophy, which is a bit daft. Yes. Finally, the elephant. Trumpety noise and water spray are its abilities, and apparently, its tusks end up in pianos played by Phil Collins types pop. Rarity 4, kill difficulty 2, and usefulness 3. The trophy is an elephant's foot waste bin. Bit morbid again, isn't it? So yeah, just a bit of a light-hearted look at some of the enemies in this game, not taking itself too seriously, which was often the vibe back then. Games were still finding their feet in 3D, and magazines like this were having a bit of fun with it all. This page in N64 Magazine issue 22 is having a look at Silicon Valley. It mentions this free tour camera thing, which sounds like a way to have a little sneak peek of the levels without actually playing, a bit of a guided tour to show off the hazards. Then there's this souvenir, a golden souvenir hidden in each level, A collectible thing, I suppose, to keep you busy finding them all. Looks like if you leave a sheep for dead you get one for free. Cheeky. Alter. Right, there's a bit about the story. Apparently a dog and a sheep are involved in a love affair, interrupted by a spaceship crashing on a dog's head. Sounds utterly bonkers, very 90s. You play as Dan the dog who can possess other animals, which seems to be the main gameplay hook. The reviewer says the puzzles are decent, and there are lots of animals to control. They mention gorillas can pick up objects, and sheep have rams to protect themselves. There's a bit about different abilities, and how you need to approach things differently depending on the animal you're controlling. They reckon Silicon Valley is beautifully designed, with a smooth learning curve and a lasting challenge. The only real criticism is the camera system. Apparently it's fine for changing the view, but a proper first-person look around like in Mario 64 or Banjo-Kazooie would have been better. Fair point. They do say holding Z zooms the camera behind your animal, which is useful. Komotu. There's also a section called Lifespan, talking about the game's software design, saying it's well designed and has variety. They mention bonus levels, and that the puzzles are different, depending on which animal you are controlling. Overall it sounds like they're quite impressed with Silicon Valley, reckon it's astonishing and a good challenge, even mentioning old-school 2D platformers in comparison. Blimey. Screenshots show a penguin swimming, a vulture, and some sheep with rams. Looks colourful enough for the N64. This page is all about the bonus games in Space Station Silicon Valley. Right then, so apparently if you play the main game properly, you get treated to these bonus games which are totally different from the main levels. They mention kangaroo boxing, dog flying and some shoot-'em-up thing. Sounds a bit bonkers, doesn't it? Gory. There are pictures showing some of these bonus bits. One shows you blasting a load of kangaroo tanks to complete the first bonus game. Another is of a kangaroo boxing ring, which looks a bit of a laugh. Then there's one where you are shooting fish at the bottom of a pool apparently that racks up big points, and another where you are winning at wall race, which involves downright devious tactics according to the text. Ratio. Lastly, there's one of some gorillas warping in, and the caption jokes about joining in for a dance if you were a bear. Bit silly really. The review itself gives the game a 91%, which is pretty decent, isn't it? They've broken it down into categories, and given each a score out of 10. Visuals, sounds, mastery and lifespan all got an 8 or 9 out of 10. Under verdict it says Silicon Valley can be a frustrating little asterisk at times, but you'll forgive it. Lovely, and indeed, jubbly. Sounds like they quite liked it then despite the odd camera issue. The reviewer, Martin Kitts, reckons it's beautifully designed and compulsive. He even jokes about becoming a rabid chimp while playing. Alright mate, calm down. Still, 91% is a good score in anyone's book back then. The next page then, it's all about NFL Blitz. Big, bold letters screaming NFL Blitz across the page, you can't miss it. It reckons it's like NBA Hangtime and Quarterback Club got shoved together in some teleporter. Bit dramatic, innit? Up top there's a bit that says previously in N64, saying they had a quick look at this game last month. Then a yellow strip telling you to flip me over for the full review. Cheeky. Scattered about are some little screenshots showing the game in action. One says, crunch. Number 57 is in a bit of pain there. Another, flattened him nicely there. Now call your teammates over and finish him off. It's the gentlemanly thing to do. Bit rough for a gentleman, I reckon. There's another one that says, 11 yards might as well be 11 feet in this game. They're clearly going for over-the-top arcade action, not your proper simulation like Madden. Bit E. There's a little box that says NFL Blitz GT. It's 128 meg, out now, costs 45 quid. Needs a controller pack and rumble pack. Naturally this is the N64. 1/2 rumble pack, whatever that means. Oh, and 100 pages, maybe that's the magazine size or something. Then there's a chunk of text saying traditionally, American football games are a bit serious, but this is for people who like the lighter side. Like Madden football, but this is quicker, more arcadey. Says if you liked Quarterback Club, you'll like this, as Midway made both. It's all about the fun, not getting bogged down in the rules and all that. 5-side football, American style. Bowa. Right at the bottom it says December 1998, page 61. So yeah, NFL Blitz. Looks like they are quite keen on it being a bit of daft fun. Probably good for a laugh with your mates after the pub. This page from N64 Magazine issue 22 is all about NFL Blitz on the N64. It's got this slightly cheeky title, Rules Are for Wimps, which is bang on for Blitz because, let's be honest, it's not exactly proper American football, is it? They're going on about how it's been magically transformed from a brutal free-for-all. which is a bit much, but yeah, it's definitely faster and more mental than your average football game. They list out the law according to NFL and law according to NFL Blitz, highlighting the differences like fewer yards for a first down and only 7 players aside in Blitz, all to make it faster and more arcadey. They even joke about tactics, which sums it up really. Then there's a section on rewriting the playbook, showing off the play editor. Apparently the built-in plays are a bit basic, but with this editor you can mess about and create your own. They've even got screenshots of the editor and someone's custom play called ARGH. Looks like you can draw routes for your receivers and everything. Bit of a faff, but I suppose if you really wanted to get into it, you could. They call one approach the headless chicken, which sounds about right for some of the plays you could probably come up with. There are screenshots of the game itself scattered around, showing gameplay moments, and little captions pointing out things like the turbo button and how you can see a trail behind the ball, which is fair enough. You do need to keep track of it in all the chaos. Right at the bottom there's a bit called Mastery, talking about using a controller pack to save your records and custom plays, and mentioning the 3-button control system, comparing it to NBA Jam. Remember NBA Jam? Now that was a game. They say huge liberties are taken with the rules of the sport, removing all the confusing technicalities and leaving a fast, rugged core, which is a fancy way of saying they've binned all the boring bits and just left the smashing and running around. Good stuff for a quick blast with your mates, I reckon. This page in N64 Magazine is having a look at NFL Blitz on the N64, which was a bit of a laugh at the time if you remember. It's all about second helpings apparently, meaning it's another bite at the cherry, likely after the arcade version. They've got some screenshots showing the game in action, you know, the usual American football ruckus. It says touchdown in big letters and 23-yard return, 3-yard loss, 2-yard loss, typical footy stuff. There's even one that says it's good, looks alright for the N64 to be fair, if a bit chunky. 2. The review reckons it's a good game to play with your mates, and better than the NBA Jam games were, which is a bit of a statement. They say the graphics are alright, not amazing but do the job, and the players move about okay. Sounds like the music is a bit pants, but the commentary and sound effects are a bit of fun. They're saying the controls are decent and it's got a good lifespan, especially if you've got someone else to play with. Taya. The reviewer, Martin Kitts, reckons it's not exactly like a proper American football game, but it's good for arcade fans and worth a go. They've given it a solid 87% overall, so not bad at all, for a bit of button bashing fun on the N64 back in '98. This page in N64 Magazine is all about Body Harvest. I remember seeing bits about this game back in the day. They're calling it bugs, blood, guts, explosions, and Greek towns called Trumptonas. Sounds dandy, which is a bit of a laugh. It was supposed to be out for ages, it seems, and they're saying it was meant to be one of the big launch games for the N64 like 3 years earlier, can you believe it? Apparently there were a bunch of games that just disappeared during development, like Buggy Boogie, Monster Dunk, Red Baron, Descent, Kirby's Air Ride and Mission. Impossible. Some of those I vaguely recall hearing about. Seemed like vaporware at the time, didn't they? Anyway, this Body Harvest sounds a bit bonkers in a good way. It's about time-traveling aliens in 2016. And some bloke called Adam Drake goes back to Greece in 1916 to sort it all out. A bit like a dodgy action movie plot that could be a laugh on the N64. Pierre King. They've got some screenshots, look a bit rough and ready, very N64, you know, blocky. Looks like you're driving around in vehicles and blowing up giant bugs or something. It's down as a star game in the mag, so they must think it's alright. Coming out on the 13th of November, Gremlin are publishing it, 96 meg cart, Rumble Pack compatible, cartridge save, and 40 quid. 40 quid! Blimey, games were expensive back then, weren't they? Oh well, at least it sounds a bit different from all the platformers we were getting at the time. They're saying to flip me over for the full review, so I guess there's more to come on this one. This page then, from N64 Magazine, seems to be having a look at Body Harvest for the N64. Right then, Snack Attack says harvesting waves is your #1 priority in this game, and apparently, these harvester beasties feed on humans. If they get 25, it's game over, but once they've munched on 6 humans they become mutants. Super powerful alien hybrids. Lovely. Alpha Command will warn you apparently, and you just follow the red arrow. Sounds simple enough, doesn't it? Just be careful. The page is split into sections for Greece, in 1916, and Java, which are different levels I reckon. For Greece, it says it's a perfect intro to the game, with some pedestrian opening and action-packed bits later on, clues dotted about, and some Bernard Manning subtlety, whatever that means in a game. Plenty of grey matter later on, and reliance on all-out blasting. Sounds like classic N64 fare. There's tips for using a tank to nick off with, and run over aliens, and using a boat to get between land and an alien processor. Then there's a bit about the harvester itself, saying you need to shoot quickly. Under alien processor, it says Struth. Close 1. He just passed your head, which must be a close call screenshot. And finally, boss, for a big bug, about to bite into your alpha tank. With explosions and pity you've only taken a third out of its energy. Sounds like a tough old boss fight then. Gah. Moving over to Java, they reckon things get a bit more difficult there. Jungles, volcanoes erupting. Even with your BHS bodysuit, Adam, who I guess is the main chap, can't survive for long in lava pools. Puzzles and more commonplace characters who don't give you too much info. Good for nothings they call them. Kongsu. Then there are 3 numbered sections with screenshots. Number 1 is about a harvester wave detected. And Daisy, apparently the pink-haired woman in Alpha Command, crops up to warn you. Red arrows appear to follow through the mists. Section 2. Each harvester is protected by multi-legged soldiers that appear as you get closer. You have to take them out before the harvesters. Luckily you've got a brilliant machine gun, and they're rubbish at their job. And Section 3. Gulp. The harvester. Apparently, the pink bit under his stomach is where the humans go. When he's full, he plops them out in green jelly. Once he's got 6, a mutant is made. And we don't want that. Right, well that's lovely, isn't it? Sounds like a right laugh, if a bit gruesome, this body harvest. This page delves into the world of body harvest, right in the N64 arena section, and takes us back to 1941. It's a bit of a walkthrough, guiding you through some of the early bits of the game. Right then, looks like tip number 4 starts off in a house, suggesting you rob it blind. Apparently you just walk up to doors and press A. Simple as that. Good old days of gaming, eh? Tip 5 mentions using your rifle and checking chests for ammo. Standard stuff really. Then there's something about a cable car and some alien on top. Sounds like you need to snipe him with the rifle. Machine gun not powerful enough they reckon. After that you get a Land Rover hidden behind the cable car station. Handy for getting around it seems. The Land Rover has a 40mm cannon apparently, facing backwards, which they say is alright as long as you are facing forward. Makes sense I suppose. Next up, tip 10. Watch out for the harvester, which can apparently wreck your vehicle. Then suddenly, you get a tank. Slow but strong, resists loads of damage. Just what you need against hordes of aliens no doubt. The tank cannon only moves up and down, a bit limited, but it'll apparently deal with these guardians. Finally, the last couple of tips are about a protector alien the size of a skyscraper, which sounds a bit daunting even for a tank. They say to keep moving and don't stop running, as it's easier for the aliens to concentrate fire if you do. Good advice in any game really. So yeah, a quick look at getting started in body harvest. Seemed a bit bonkers back then, all those alien types and vehicles. Remember renting this one from Blockbuster? Wasn't quite sure what to make of it at first, but it had a certain charm. This page from N64 Magazine is having a look at Body Harvest, a game we were quite keen on back then on the N64. This article is all about the USA level, set in the 60s apparently, and it's billed as the best level in the game, which is a bold claim. Killage. They're running through a guide, telling you to grab a car straight away, as there's a harvester wave coming. Apparently those foot soldier alien blokes, the green blobs, are tougher in America than they were in Java earlier in the game, cheeky sods. And this level sounds like a proper blaster with laser turrets everywhere. Okay. The guide talks about saving humans being gobbled up, and then getting to a massive alien boss. Apparently you need to aim for its head. Helpful tip there. Cheers. They also mention a nurse on a rooftop, who tells you about this alien processor thingy you need to get to. Sounds like typical alien invasion stuff really. The big bad guy is warping in, and you need to destroy him to stop all the harvesting waves and these blue shields they've put up. Then it's time to jump in a plane or something they reckon. Hapa. It does sound like a laugh, doesn't it? All those aliens exploding in a mess, and running over humans for a laugh if you fancy it. They were always a bit cheeky in N64 Mag, weren't they? Good times. The next page in this N64 Mag delves into Body Harvest, which was a bit of a quirky one, wasn't it? It's got this section called N64 Arena Body Harvest, and it seems to be giving some tips for the Siberia levels set in 1966 and 1991. In 66 Siberia, the advice is all about tackling the processor boss. Apparently you need to get in close and aim for its head, just like its smaller cousins, and they mention a second helicopter on the roof for emergencies, which is handy to know. Then in 91 Siberia, they're talking about zombies, trains and aliens. The usual suspects for body harvest really. There's a bit about balancing your in-air flight controls, which could be a right pain with the N64 controller sometimes, and using a status beacon to warp between levels, which is useful if you get lost in those tunnel sections in America. They're also on about crushing zombies with vehicles, which is always a laugh, and driving a train through an avalanche blocking a tunnel sounds like a typical body harvest bonkers moment. And then there's wasps or aliens, which you need to shoot down carefully as they explode. Right at the end, there's a little section on points, saying run-of-the-mill soldiers are worth a healthy 200 points, and those annoying flying scouts give you 500, while the big mutants and bosses can net you thousands, so worth taking down if you can manage it. It was all about racking up the points back then, wasn't it? This page in N64 Magazine is having a look at the comet level in Body Harvest, right? Body Harvest, it was in development for donkey's years it felt like back then. They're saying here it's been in development for over 3 years, which, in the 90s, felt like an eternity for a game. They're talking about the visuals, and they mention the fogging. Which, yeah, you couldn't escape that on the N64 in the early days, could you? They call it a technique that ran over early N64 games, and carried on until GoldenEye, which is spot on really. Made things look a bit murky at times, didn't it? Looking at the screenshots, it's that classic Body Harvest style. A bit rough around the edges graphically. Polygon work not the tidiest, they say. But it's got that B-movie charm apparently. A bit like Kilroy. Remember Kilroy? God, that was awful. Kugu. Gameplay-wise in Comet, they're saying you're blasting shedloads of nasties, and you have to take down communicator poles and then face the boss. Sounds like typical Body Harvest really. Driving around in your tank, causing havoc. They even point out the tank's bouncy bottom can cause problems if you get shot at a lot. Handy tip. Causing user. They mention the music being good, piano tinklage when nothing's happening, bit more exciting when the aliens show up, which sounds decent, and puzzles crop up now and then, they say, mostly from chatting to the locals. A bit of searching, and you'll find the answers apparently. Overall, they reckon it plays beautifully, even if it looks a bit scabby landing in Greece. Bit harsh maybe, but that's magazines for you. Always gotta have a slight dig somewhere. Sounds like a good bit of bug battering action. All in all, reminds you of simpler times, eh? This page, then, is a review for Body Harvest on the N64 from back in the day. It's got that classic N64 magazine look, a bit garish, but you know where you are. They've slapped a big Star Game logo on it, so it must be decent. Looking at the screenshots, it's a bit of a 3D action game, bit rough around the edges visually, even for the N64, but I remember that was kind of the style back then. There's a bloke with a beard in one of the speech bubbles, and some monstrous green thing in another. Gameplay-wise, it seems you're shooting aliens with various vehicles, cars, boats, even planes it sounds like. Oh yeah. The review reckons the vehicles are a gold-line stroke of genius and essential to the gameplay, acting as shields and giving you speed boosts. They mention loads of different vehicles, like 130 different modes, which sounds a bit excessive if you ask me, but hey, more is more, right? They praise the visuals considering the fog, and reckon the sounds and music are spot on too. Mastery is an 8 out of 10, and lifespan a 9, so it must be a pretty meaty game to get through. Right at the bottom they give it a whopping 91%, calling it a grand-scale blaster, and the biggest game on the N64. Bit strong, isn't it? Still, for a slice of mayhem that Christmas in '98, they said it should be a priority. Fair enough. This page in N64 Magazine, right, kicks off with a look back at what they've covered before. There's a little snippet with wrestler Kevin Nash worried about his shoulders, bless him. Then it jumps straight into the N64 Arena section, and it's all about WCW versus NWO Revenge. Seems like they're previewing or reviewing it, can't quite tell. There are a bunch of screenshots, typical wrestling game stuff. Folks grappling in the ring, crowd going wild. Looks a bit blocky, mind you, but that's N64 for you. Foreign. There's a little info box too. Says it's out on November 27th, needs 128 megs, 1 to 4 players, Rumble Pack compatible, and costs 40 quid. 40 quid! Blimey. The article itself is about the game, reckon it's saying it's the return of the MIPs, whatever that means. Men in pants apparently, oh right, wrestlers. They're focusing on this wrestler Raven, who apparently leads his flock of fighters. It's saying before each fight he comes swaggering in like he can't be bothered, and would rather be at home watching telly. Sounds about right for some of these wrestlers, doesn't it? They reckon it's basically the same as the previous game, WCW vs NWO World Tour, but with a few little tweaks and improvements. They say luckily it's just about managed to make the game alright overall, but it's nothing to write home about compared to the wonders of, well, they don't actually say what it compares badly to, do they? Slightly lukewarm then, not exactly setting the world on fire, but probably a bit of alright wrestling fun for the N64 at the time. This page in N64 Magazine seems to be having a bit of a chuckle about the wrestling games on the Nintendo 64, specifically acclaims WWF Warzone and this new WCW/WF Revenge game. They're talking about how Warzone let you make your own wrestler, Frankenstein style, messing with everything from their body shape to wigs. Apparently Revenge takes this further with a screen to change your wrestler's costume and name groundbreaking stuff back then. They reckon it's a bit cheeky of THQ to let you change wrestler loyalty, switching them between WWF and WCW, and then sticking different branded outfits on them. Apparently there's loads of costumes, though some of the gear is apparently too big to use typical Warrior. There are screenshots showing off the creator player stuff in Revenge, including some truly bizarre looking custom wrestlers in green and orange spandex, and something they've named a frog doing a move. They reckon it's a bit of a laugh to give wrestlers silly names, and put them in battle royales. They mention that Revenge has about 80 wrestlers, which is a decent number, split into WCW and NWO teams, plus some other less known groups. There's an edit character mode, though they think it's a bit poor but still enough variety. They also talk about loads of different stadiums and tournament modes where you can win spangly gold belts. They also mention the wrestler entrances, with fireworks and dodgy rock music, which you could skip by pressing start handy if you've seen them once already. Graphics-wise, they are not massively impressed, saying Warzone was only just acceptable back when it was the only wrestling game, and Revenge doesn't look a whole lot better compared to the smoother graphics in Warzone. They even say the wrestlers' arms look a bit disjointed charming. This page delves into the wrestling mayhem of WCW vs NWO, Revenge on the N64. It's all about embracing the sort of rule-breaking antics that would get you a right telling off in PE, but in a computer game it's all good fun, isn't it? They're highlighting the stuff the ref conveniently ignores, things like brawling outside the ring, which they say you can do with a tap of the top C button. Apparently it's a laugh to scrap outside, though you can get disqualified if you're not careful. Then there's the weapon situation. Under the heading, "Look at my stick." It seems you can grab all sorts of objects outside the ring, from stop signs to dustbins. A right mixed bag for clobbering your opponent. They mention it's handy for a quick punch in when you're getting overwhelmed. Manage this talks about the manager interference, which sounds properly chaotic. Managers, from the portly fellas to the, more glamorous types, can get involved. Apparently if you're laying down after a beating, they might teach you a lesson, or if it's a lady trainer, you might get a kick where it hurts, like the good old days. They wander off after that, those managers, chickens they call them. The ring plus weapon bit suggests combining ring exits and weapons. The trick is to knock your opponent outside, then get back in the ring yourself before the count. Cheeky win apparently. Finally, in visuals, they're on about the graphics. THQ, the developers, have apparently made the game faster and smoother compared to older wrestling games, more like watching it on the telly they reckon. They do mention some graphical glitches, like faces clipping through bodies. Yerk is the word they use. Charming. They also mention the speed is a key thing setting it apart from the older games, and the long press/short press controls, which makes dragging opponents about easy enough. Sounds like classic wrestling game fun from back then, bit rough and ready but still entertaining enough. The next page in N64 Magazine features a review for WCW/NWO Revenge, and the headline is, "Spot on, nobody likes a show-off." They're talking about the wrestler entrances, and all the razzmatazz that goes with it, like fireworks and overly dramatic posing, saying it's a bit much but in a good way, like a slightly naff fashion show they reckon. Apparently you can even do Roddy Piper and Hollywood Hogan impressions during entrances, which, fair enough, sounds a laugh. Graphically they're saying it's alright, a 7 out of 10, but reckons Warzone on the PlayStation was a bit prettier. Sound gets a 6, typical wrestling game noises, nothing special there then. Mastery and lifespan both get a 6 and 8 respectively, sounds like it's easy enough to pick up but will keep you going a while, especially in multiplayer. The screenshots show off some of the entrances and in-game action. You can see Eric Bischoff looking like a proper smug git, Scott Hall and Scott Steiner looking moody, and even Raven looking a bit worse for wear, which is probably accurate. They even mention the sold-out stadium having a splendid mirror effect. Bit much, lads. The reviewer reckons it's a decent wrestling game, especially with mates, all about leg pulling and snapping backs, hilarious apparently, but it's no WWF Warzone, scoring a solid but not amazing 75%. So yeah, improvement on the last WCW game, but still not quite top of the pile. Sounds about right for the time, to be honest. This page in N64 Magazine features a look at Starshot, Space Circus Fever. Right then, Infogrames trying their hand at a platformer on the N64, eh? According to the info box here, it landed on shelves on the 27th of November, weighed in at 96 megs, needed a controller pack for backup, Rumble Pack support, and set you back £40. Single player only, mind you. V set you back for ba. They've got a few screenshots scattered about. One's very purple, apparently. Another needs a super weapon to open a door, typical platforming fare. There's mention of changing room tents that fire you off to new areas, which sounds a bit odd, even for back then. And they're not holding back on their opinion of the main character either, calling him not the prettiest protagonist ever. Ouch. The review itself is pondering if Starshot can stand up against the likes of Banjo-Kazooie and Mario. Bit of a tall order for a third-party platformer in '98, wasn't it? They mention Gex and Gomon as yardsticks too. Doesn't sound like they are blown away, saying it might deserve a C+. Enthusiastic C+ mind, so not a total disaster then, but definitely not troubling the big boys. They reckon every attempt has to face up to the benchmark set by Rare and Nintendo, which was certainly true at the time, wasn't it? It was a tough market to crack if you weren't one of the top dogs. Oh, and right at the top left, it seems they'd already previewed Starshot in issue 17, so this was probably the full review then. Big top or big plop? It asks at the bottom. Sorry about that. Cheeky. This page in N64 Magazine is from the Wish You Were Here postcard section, taking a look at some exotic gaming locations. It's all about Starshot, a game they seem to be quite familiar with. Warrior. First up is Torture World, described as a delightful store on Killer Expo World. Sounds charming, doesn't it? They're moaning about the moving platforms, and reckon someone called Martin has fallen off them a fair few times. There's a bit about a lazy enemy who doesn't even attack you, and a daft challenge to guess what film is being shown in the background of one of the screenshots. Apparently it's very sad indeed. Right, worry. Then we're off to Earth, which in Starshot has become your typical post-apocalyptic wasteland. Apparently, they had a bit of fun wandering around in armored suits, but it was a short-lived pleasure. They mention being in the cinema there too, though not much was happening. Quarantine is next, where they were on the hunt for some super weapon. They list some of the weapons like an expletive firing cannon and a rip-and-spit-down-o-matic imaginative names, I'll give them that. They go on about the level design being tricky but fair, saying it's frustrating but in a good way, apparently down to the designer's sadistic sleights of hand. Bit dramatic, aren't we? They also make a point about the large shadows in the game, saying it's actually helpful to see where you're going to land when jumping. Unlike Mario, apparently. After that, it's the Iron Museum on Ultima Crash. They admit it's not that interesting, but they had to mention it for a terrible pun about iron-type objects and iron-increasing clothes type. Oh dear. There's a mention of fat wobbly robots firing marshmallows. That sounds memorable. Finally, there's a section titled Visuals, which gets a bit critical. They say the game jerks like a body popper, because the graphics engine is sacrificing smoothness for speed. They go on about the jumping being tricky because of this jerkiness and the odd running style of Starshot. Apparently, judging jumps from the chase camera view is a nightmare. They moan about the shadow again, saying it's too big and the game has a variable frame rate which gets worse when there's more on screen. And to top it off, they don't like the camera zoom. The default is too far away, and the close-up is too close. Sounds like they're having a bit of a love-hate relationship with Starshot, to be honest. Still, classic N64 mag, bit of a moan but still clearly enjoying it deep down. This page of N64 Magazine is having a look at Starshot, Space Circus Fever. Right then, Space Circus. Sounds a bit daft, doesn't it? Apparently the game has a lot of talking in it, which they reckon is good for figuring out what to do next. They even say the French to English translation is better than your average Japanese to English effort, so that's something, I suppose. There's a bit about the story being complicated. Some future circus war nonsense. Looks like you're on Starshot's spaceship, and from the control room you can find out about the planet and your mission. There are also some robots kicking about, playing mahjong apparently. Madness. They've got a section on the Happy Bump Bar, which sounds like a right knees up. The dialogue snippets they've put in are a bit bonkers. Something about a jukebox and a bladder, and calling someone Star Spot. Very odd. There's a screenshot of some characters in what looks like a bar area. Callings. The reviewer reckons Starshot himself is a bit of a gormless looking chap, and wonders why he looks so rendered. Bit harsh, maybe. Another screenshot shows Starshot falling off the spaceship, which they find amusing. They say it's a bit of a bleak destination, this Virtua Circus spaceship, not as good as the Lun Poly guidebook made out. Bassy. Down the side, they've got these little boxes with marks out of 10, and they've given it 6 for visuals, saying it's alright in places but not really pushing the N64, which is fair enough. Sounds get 6 as well, tunes are okay, but the speech is apparently annoying, burbling and the like. Mastery gets a 5, they reckon it's not really that clever. But big levels with no loading times is a plus, I suppose. Lifespan gets a 6, it's a big game but apparently a bit too tricky and demanding at times, which is a bit of a downer. Oh. Verdict is a 68%. They reckon without the flaws it might have been a decent game, but as it is it's just not quite good enough. They've got a quote saying, "Without its glaring flaws, Starshot might have challenged the early 70s, but as it is it's just not good enough." Pretty damning really. James Price wrote the review. Seems like a bit of a mixed bag then, this Starshot game. This page from N64 Magazine, likely from back in '98, is having a proper look at F-Zero X. Remember that one? They're asking if it's the fastest racer ever, and well they reckon it pretty much is. The reviewer's going on about how it's like comparing a Ferrari to a Mini, all about the speed you see. They mentioned the Japanese version was in issue 19, and they were already chatting about the slightly odd look behind feature then. Bit of a gimmick if you ask me. There are some screenshots dotted about, typical racing game stuff. One talks about figuring out some trick to glide or pitch down, sounds a bit cryptic. Another one's about running out of lives, bit dramatic calling the player a speed-mad fool, but hey, it's F-Zero. They're also saying the tracks are way more wavy and curvy than the old SNES game, which is fair enough, it was a big jump in graphics back then, wasn't it? There's a little info box for F-Zero X2 Nintendo game, 128 meg, uses a controller pack, 1 to 4 players, and Rumble Pack compatible. 40 quid it was, not cheap. And it's got the N64 Star Game logo, so they clearly thought it was the bee's knees. Yeah, F-Zero X, it was fast alright, proper fast. Might have been a bit too much for some folk, but it was definitely something else at the time. This page from N64 Magazine, back in '98, is having a look at F-Zero X. You've got a couple of screenshots of the game in action. One looks like a pretty standard race, showing the speedometers and track. The other one's a bit different, maybe a view from behind your vehicle. It mentions the rival championship leader, sounds like the game gets quite competitive. There's a bit of text that's talking about how F-Zero X has this unusual thing where you don't just lose by finishing last, you can run out of energy or even fall off the track, and lose a life. Which is a bit harsh, isn't it? Apparently the number of lives you get depends on the difficulty level. They're comparing it to Mario a bit, saying it's a bit artificial, this live system, but that it works for F-Zero X and adds a bit of sting. So it's not just about coming first, it's about surviving too. Which is a decent enough twist, I suppose. Then there's a big image of the Blue Falcon machine, Captain Falcon's Ride. Classic bit of kit that is. And down at the bottom there's good old EAD, Nintendo's big cheese designer, waving his fist looking pleased with himself. Typical magazine page from back then really, getting you interested in the latest N64 release. This page in N64 Magazine is all about F-Zero X, and it's looking at time trial mode specifically. They've picked their best 6 time trial tracks, and are giving you the lowdown on each. Looks like they've gone for Mute City, Port Town and Red Canyon on this double page spread, with another 3 to come presumably. For Mute City, it's all about the boost chevrons, right at the start, classic F-Zero stuff, miss them at your peril apparently. Then for Port Town, they're warning you about ice on the right and to bank sharply inside, calling you a fool if you hit it, bit harsh that. Red Canyon is next, and it's all about jumps, lots of jumps, especially this first big one, and getting your speed right, sounds tricky. Then there's a how-to section, and it's got a few tips. First up is go faster. Pretty obvious really, they are saying hit all the boost chevrons, they are essential for a fast time, no surprises there. Next, spin like a fool, which sounds interesting. Apparently you can do this spin attack by holding Z or the right shoulder button and double tapping the other, and it sends rivals flying, good for getting rid of annoying racers. Finally, nudge an opponent into oblivion, sounds a bit aggressive. This one is about a subtle nudge to get rid of people, by double tapping the shoulder button, or Z, again, to send them into a wall. They say it's tricky but useful for later settings. Overall, it's a decent page giving some solid tips for F-Zero X time trials and combat. Back in '98, this was the kind of thing you'd pore over to get those extra few seconds off your lap times, or to get one up on your mates in multiplayer. Good times. This page then, is all about F-Zero X, isn't it? Right then, they're showing off some of the tracks in the game, reckon they're called Big Blue 2, Mute City 3, and Big Hand. Sounds like typical Nintendo daftness. They're going on about how Big Blue 2 is deceptively twisty and Mute City 3 has loads of jumps, surprise surprise, and Big Hand is just a right tricky course with corners everywhere. Looks pretty fast from the speed readings they've got there. And no. Then there's a bit about course ghosts, as seems like if you're some sort of amazing player you can unlock these ghost races by doing well in time trials. Always something to keep you going, I suppose, if you've got that kind of time on your hands. After that, it's the how-to section, giving tips on going faster without using boost chevrons, and stopping your craft from sliding. Bit cheeky telling us how to play, innit? But fair enough, F-Zero games are always a bit of a nightmare to handle at first, all that crazy speed. Apparently using the shoulder buttons and the Z trigger helps stop you sliding into every wall in the King and Joker cups. Good to know, because those cups are proper mental, corners everywhere, makes you wonder if they even bothered with straights. All in all, looks like they're pretty impressed with F-Zero X, and to be fair, it did look properly rapid back then. This page in N64 Magazine, issue 22, seems to be diving into the new Generation X mode in F-Zero X. It looks like they're quite impressed with the difficulty, comparing it to GoldenEye's 007 agent setting. Remember how tough that was? Apparently, to unlock this master skill setting, and the X Cup, you've got to complete all the Jack, Queen, King and Joker cups on Expert. Sounds like a proper challenge, doesn't it? Waroo. The reviewer's going on about how hard it is, mentioning looking up words like exactitude and perfection in a dictionary before attempting it on master mode. Bit dramatic, but I can see where they're coming from. F-Zero X is fast, proper fast, and demands some serious control. They even joke about the swear box in the office, so you know it's got them going. They do make a point about the balance between difficulty and fun, suggesting Nintendo nailed it with this update. Tracks are randomly generated in the X Cup, which is a neat touch, meaning each race is different. They've included little captions under screenshots, like one saying a track looks a bit like Australia, another about an easy course, and one mentioning aiming to finish the first lap in 20th on higher skill levels, which sounds utterly brutal. They're also having a bit of a dig at people who might call F-Zero X ugly, saying Nintendo went for a modest look for a nonsense attitude. A polite way of saying it's not the prettiest game perhaps, but it's all about speed and gameplay, isn't it? They end by saying it's not unattractive, but also not a triumph of aesthetic accomplishment. A very balanced and British take on it all. This page from N64 Magazine, or Arena section to be precise, is all about F-Zero X. Nintendo's brought out this super speedy racing game for the N64. You can see from the screenshots it's all very fast and futuristic looking tracks. The review bangs on about how well made and balanced it is, calling it a masterpiece even. Apparently the visuals and sounds are good, and it'll keep you playing for ages, or so they say. There's a bit of a moan about the Rumble Pack not being great, which is fair enough. They slapped a massive 91% on it, reckon it's the fastest racer ever, and a helpful tip for winning: cross the finish line first. Right then. F-Zero X, yeah, it was fast, maybe a bit too much at times, but decent enough for its day. Let's see what else is in here. This page is an article from N64 Magazine, and it's all about the game Rakuga Kids for the N64. Seems like they were pretty chuffed to finally get it over here in the UK, after having to import it from Japan in issue 20. Apparently Konami have given it a pale makeover so it's now in proper English for us Brits. The reviewer seems to be quite taken with it, saying the graphics are top-notch, and nothing like your usual beat-em-up. They reckon it's like Clay Fighter but with actual talented artists involved, which is a bit of a dig at Clay Fighter, I suppose. They mention some of the characters like Bear Tank, who can apparently sprout caterpillar tracks and firebombs from his head turret. Sounds a bit mad, doesn't it? And Masa, who disappears into a rotating chicken. Even weirder. There are screenshots dotted around showing in-game action. Looks like your typical 2D fighter, but with a crayon-drawn style. One bit mentions double Bear Tank snot bubble blowing action, and another about Roy sticking a trumpet somewhere unpleasant when the sun doesn't shine. Bit cheeky for a kids game, eh? There's also mention of Marza and Professor Mamezo going back to school. The story sounds a bit daft, something about magic crayons and kids in Twinkletown. But hey, it's a bit of fun, isn't it? Going. Down the bottom there's a little box with game info. It's for Konami, 96 meg, controller pack is back, and it's a cartridge. Says it's out in November and costs £40. Not bad for a bit of crayon-fueled fighting action, I suppose. This page in N64 Magazine from back in '98 is having a look at Rakuga Kids. It seems to be one of those slightly oddball beat-em-ups, very colourful and a bit bonkers looking. They're going through the magic attacks in the game, saying each character has two, done with the usual fighting game motions or just by tapping R, which sounds like a bit of a cheat. They highlight 5 of the best magic moves, things like Bear Tank's Lion Submarine Squash, Nola's Flower and Mole combo, something about Mamezo and a broken elevator, Captain Catkit with a fire hydrant, and Robot CHO using a UFO catcher. Mad stuff really. Bro combo. The review itself seems fairly positive. They liked the visuals, saying they're imaginative and really cute. Sounds are just alright though. Nothing amazing, they reckon. Mastery is apparently not that deep, but they say it's got good lifespan if you play with mates. Overall, they've given it a decent 80%, calling it cute, sweet, and a good beat-em-up, especially if you like a bit of daftness. Sounds like one of those games that was a bit different from the usual Street Fighter clones, perhaps worth a look back then if you were after something a bit sillier. This page in N64 Magazine is all about NHL 99 for the Nintendo 64. Right at the top, it proclaims it's hockey and it's hokey, which isn't exactly setting the world on fire, is it? They're saying EA's NHL is here, and everyone should give it a wave. A bit subdued, even for us Brits. There's a bit called no comment about the game's commentary. Apparently it's provided by some suitably experienced individual, whoever that is, but they reckon he's a bit of a nutter. Apparently he comes out with lines like, "Freight train, woo-woo," which they found funny enough to mention. Then we get into the ratings. Visuals get a 7, which is decent. They reckon it looks better than the PlayStation version. As you'd expect, really. Sounds are a 5, pap commentary, and forgettable music is the verdict there. Mastery is a 6, again better looking and moving than the PlayStation version. Lifespan a 7, it's a bit easy apparently. Overall verdict is 74%. Not bad, but not brilliant, pretty much sums it up. They hope EA sorts out the dodgy AI for the next year's game, NHL 2000. There's a table with NHL to 99 at the top. It's out now, 96 megabytes, needs a controller pack, is 1 to 4 players and supports the Rumble pack, all for £40. Standard N64 stuff back then. Toriu. In the main text, they compare it to FIFA and Madden, saying NHL 99 is a debut on the N64. They say it's okay, but the passing system isn't great, and the AI of your own teammates is a bit feeble, dawdling around. They show a few in-game screenshots, looks like a fairly standard ice hockey game from the time, players battling it out on the ice. There are also these little speech bubble captions. One says, "Could it be that we've just broken another obscure rule?" And another, "Face me off, yeah. Just face me off." And then a really random one, "I've got some fascinating slides of washing lines in the garage. Wanna see them? No? Oh." Typical N64 Magazine humor. A bit daft, really. Overall impression is it's a solid but unspectacular hockey game, good for N64 but nothing groundbreaking. The next page in this issue, right then, it's all about a game called Gasp. Yeah, with the exclamation marks, like they were really trying to sell it. Turns out it's a fighter from Konami, remember them? They were usually alright. This one though, judging by what they're saying, maybe not so much. Seems like they're comparing it to Tekken and Fighter's Destiny, trying to big it up as the N64's Tekken moment, but the reviewer isn't having any of it. They reckon it's a bit pants actually, saying the fighting system is a bit iffy, and the graphics are nothing special, detail-free tripe they call them. Harsh. Apparently you can make your own character, but even that's not enough to save it from being a bit of a mess. They even bring up Anne Robinson for some reason, comparing the animation style to her. Bit random, that. They've given it a measly 47%, and the verdict is, avoid like the plague. Ouch. Then down the side, there's a bit about NHL 99. Looks like they're not too impressed with that either. Saying the computer players are a bit daft, making it too easy even on higher difficulties. Apparently it looks alright, nice and shiny, they say about the ice, but it's not exactly blowing anyone away. They're having a bit of a laugh with the screenshots too, captioning them with sarcastic comments. One says, "If you had guns in NHL," another one about winning a bidder if you battle through to the end. Cheeky sods. Sounds like neither game is a classic then, more like something you'd quickly forget about down the pub with your mates. This page is all about NASCAR, blimey. It's called The Queue, and it's previewing NASCAR 99 for the N64. They're kicking off by pointing out a funny quirk in the game intro. Seems all the cars are spaced out really evenly, like they're in a perfectly formed queue, which is a bit odd on a racetrack. They reckon the game's alright as it feels like real NASCAR racing, at least in terms of how the cars line up initially. Apparently, in the proper game, the cars form a neat orderly queue at the start too. If you nudge a computer car, it might wobble a bit, but then it just slots right back into line, which they find a bit much, not acceptable apparently. Looking at the screenshots, there are some amusing captions, like one about a rare two-car cuddle-up in NASCAR, and another about a driver doing a futile jump for freedom when they crash. Bit dramatic, aren't they? There's another one showing cars stopping on the hard shoulder for a quick sarnie. Cheeky. The review itself in the main article. America chucks another tedious sport our way. Sounds a bit tongue-in-cheek. They mention it's based on the American motorsport thing, set on oval tracks, like the Days of Thunder film. They say someone called Tom tried to make it exciting, but driving in circles isn't everyone's idea of a good time, is it? Man North? Despite that, they say NASCAR 99 has some good bits. Each car feels different to drive, and the handling is decent enough you get a sense of control in the long corners. You can mess about customizing your cars, and there are replays. That's standard stuff. They mention the stats and drivers are from the 1997 season and are correct, which is good. Apparently one of the commentators says Dick Trickle is spurting towards the finish, which they think is comedy gold and almost worth the price alone. They do moan a bit though, saying the roadside scenery is a bit basic, and you get that pop-up mist in the distance. And when there's loads going on with crashes and sparks, the frame rate drops right down, chugging along at about 2 frames a second, which is a bit rubbish. Heh. The little info box says NASCAR 99 is from EA Sports, needs 96 meg of memory, uses the controller pack and rumble pack. It was out now in America, but coming in November over here in the UK. It's a massive 38-page review apparently, for $55, or about 42 quid. Seems like they were giving it a good look over back then. Probably alright for a bit of a laugh if you were into your racing games back in '98. This page from the import arena in N64 Magazine takes a look at NASCAR 99. Right then, so it seems they're diving into the options you can tweak in the game, things like damage settings. Apparently if you turn damage off you need a nuclear explosion to wreck your motor, and if it's on, a gentle nudge from another car writes you off charming. Yellow flags, equipment failures, tire pressure, rear spoilers, wedges and gear ratios all get a mention. Seems a bit much for a simple racing game back then, didn't really need to be a pit lane mechanic to enjoy it. Worry. Then there's a section on the tracks. Watkins Glen, Bristol Night, California, and Indianapolis all get a brief look in. Watkins Glen sounds a bit tricky with its bends, Bristol is an oval under the lights, California is another oval with trees riveting stuff, and Indianapolis is apparently just another oval. They do mention the crowds at Indy looking like they're right up against your telescreen, which is probably quite something on an N64. The commentator gets a ribbing too, apparently all he says is, "Man oh man," and "Whoa." Sounds about right for some of these games, very insightful commentary. Visually, they reckon the cardboard trees are something to behold, and the sounds are described as hideous engine noise and commentators who are just there for a laugh. Mastery is compared to F1, and apparently it makes you burst into tears, which is not a good sign, is it? Lifespan is apparently the same all the way through, but 2-player mode saves it a bit apparently. The verdict is pretty blunt: if you fancy driving your car in circles, this is the game for you. They give it a 59%, which is, well, not exactly setting the world on fire, is it? They even suggest you'd be better off playing Cruisin' World instead. Ouch. Still, NASCAR on the N64, eh? Those were the days. This page from N64 Magazine, issue 22, is shouting about a chance to win 100 quid and a copy of Zelda 64. Blimey, Zelda 64, back then that was the holy grail, wasn't it? Everyone was losing their minds about it coming out in November. To win, you had to come up with a coherent sentence, using the words pants, throbbing, and fungus. Bit of a strange combo, but alright. And you also had to write a funny caption for a fridge magnet featuring old Foray from Final Fantasy. Remember him? Mad old beardy bloke. They wanted to be made to laugh, basically. They mention James and Martin, probably some of the lads on the mag, talking about their stern morning face and mildly psychotic stare. Sounds about right for games journos back then, fueled by coffee and deadlines. The rules are pretty standard stuff. Closing date in November '98, no future publishing employees allowed, and the N64 team are the judges. Their decision is final. Bit ominous. They also say the Zelda 64 will be sent out as soon as it's out, and if you had an American NTSC machine, to let them know. Makes sense, region locking was a right pain back then. And rule number 5? Simon says, "Tabby, put your hands in the air." Cheeky. Classic N64 mag humor, a bit daft. This page is showing you how to have a bit of a laugh with the N64 fridge magnet that came with the magazine. Remember those? It's suggesting you break up the magnet into individual words, stick it on your fridge, and create your own hilarious game reviews. Bit of a silly idea, but it's a bit of fun, innit? They've even given an example sentence about a game being Tim's Stick Fungus, and a freaking lovely beef burger, which is, well, something. They want you to send in your best efforts, either a photo of your fridge or just the sentence written down, and they are giving away a prize for the funniest ones, 100 quid, and a copy of Zelda 64, which was still pretty fresh at this point in '98. They don't want the whole magnet back, just your witty sentences to make them chuckle. It's all a bit of harmless fun, and a way to pass the time before the next big Nintendo release, I suppose. I remember getting these magnets, though I can't say I ever made a comedic genius sentence with mine. This page of N64 Magazine, harking back to issue 22, blimey, that's going back a bit. It's all about cheat codes in it. Tips Extra they called it, classic stuff. So if you were stuck on your games, this is where you'd look. They've got a Classic 64, which is for Doom 64. Remember that one? Proper dark and moody Doom, wasn't it? They give you a password to type in for all the goodies: health, armor, weapons, the lot, and even skips you to the final level if you were that desperate to finish it. Then there's Turok, Dinosaur Hunter. Talk about blast from the past. This one's for Flying Turok. Seems you could type in LKMBRD at the cheat screen to walk through walls and fly around using the L and R buttons. Bit cheeky, but helpful if you were stuck on those levels with all the raptors jumping out you. Lastly, they've got Forsaken 64. That was a bit of a different beast, a 3D shooter, where you were flying around. They've crammed loads of cheats in for this one. Freeze enemies, infinite weapons, infinite energy, invisibility, one-hit kills, stealth mode. Pretty much everything you could want to make the game a right walkover if you wanted to. They're all button combos you had to put in at the game pause screen. Handy if you were struggling against the evil MDF, whatever that was. So yeah, cheats galore on this page. Back in the day before the internet was everywhere, these little tips pages were gold dust if you were stuck on a game. Good times. This page from N64 Magazine is the reader's tips section, like the bit you'd flick to straight away to see if anyone had found anything decent for your games, back before the internet was really a thing. They've got readers' top 10 tips, splashed across the top, and it's a mix of stuff for various games. Kicking off with GoldenEye, there are actually 3 tips for it, showing how much everyone rinsed that game back then. First one's about remote mines in multiplayer, for a bit of mindless violence as they put it, which is a bit strong, but yeah, GoldenEye was always good for blowing your mates up. Another GoldenEye tip is about the frigate level, something to do with turning around in the speedboat to see how messy Bond really is, whatever that means. Sounds a bit daft. And another one for GoldenEye, this time about getting Bond to die dramatically on stairs in multiplayer. Bit morbid maybe. There's also a tip for F-Zero X, about getting really low times by using Crazy Bear and tweaking your car settings. Sounds like proper hardcore racing stuff for the speed freaks. WWF Warzone gets a mention, with a tip for racking up points in single player, probably to unlock something or other. IS-98, or International Superstar Soccer 98 to give it its full name, has a tip about creating player faces. Remember spending ages making your mates look ridiculous in that? Cruisin' World has a shortcut in Mexico, which sounds like the kind of thing you'd actually use. Aero Gouge has a tip about getting a time ending in .64 to race as an N64 controller, a bit of a novelty I suppose. Banjo-Kazooie gets a look in with a tip about Snacker the Shark in Treasure Trove Cove. Apparently you just press top C to scare him off, not exactly mind-blowing is it? And finally, Diddy Kong Racing has a tip about seeing time trial scores after you've finished the game properly. At the bottom there's a form to send in your own tips, to get a badge, and maybe a Macapad controller, one of those clear plastic ones. Classic magazine filler, but you'd still read it all to see if anything was actually useful. The next page in N64 Magazine is having a bit of a laugh about their hotline, saying if you've got a gaming problem they're here to help, just like the old Nintendo hotline phone service used to be. It's a tips page, focusing on Banjo-Kazooie this time around. They've got sections for different areas of the game like Bubble Gloop Swamp and Freezy Peak. For Bubble Gloop Swamp, they are answering questions about finding a honeycomb piece and how to get the jigsaw piece after hitting the witch switch. The advice is pretty straightforward, telling you to go to Mumbo's hut for the honeycomb, and for the jigsaw piece, you need to do a bit of puzzle solving with doors, vases and jump pads after hitting the switch near Gruntilda's statue. Then for Freezy Peak, they are asking how to destroy the snowball throwing snowmen. Apparently you need to use beak bomb attacks on the red X on their hats. It mentions it can be tricky to avoid getting hit by snowballs, which is fair enough, those snowmen could be a pain. Finally, there's a question about learning to use the wading boots in Bubble Gloop Swamp. The answer is that Bottles is hanging around near the entrance to the swamp, and you just need to turn around to find his molehill before crossing the first bridge. There's a picture of Bottles the mole looking a bit smug, and a screenshot of Banjo and Kazooie in Freezy Peak, probably getting pelted by snowballs. Overall, standard tips page fare for Banjo-Kazooie, just the kind of thing you'd flick through back in the day when you were stuck on a level. This page from an old N64 mag, yeah I remember these. It's all about getting help with your games, proper old school hotline style. At the top it's advertising the Nintendo hotline, with a phone number, 017-03652222, blimey that takes me back. They were boasting about expert game players helping you out. Open all hours practically. There was even a new automated service for late night calls, which is pretty advanced for 98, eh? 50 pence a minute though. They even gave another number, 08916699945, for the automated service, and told you to have a pen and paper ready. Then there are a few questions and answers about games. First one is about Banjo-Kazooie in Gobi's Valley. Someone's stuck on the which switch bit and can't reach the flight pad. The answer is to go to the next world, Gobi's Valley, funny that, to get running shoes in Freezy Peak and then fly back. Bit of a runaround, wasn't it? There's also a bit about getting through the pyramid maze in Gobi's Valley if you keep dying. Sounds like a right pain. The advice is just to go left, down, right, then left, right and follow the one-way path. Simple when you know how, I suppose. Oi. Next, there's a question about watering a tree at the start of a level, which turns out to be about Diddy Kong Racing. You have to rescue the camel, beak bust the back of the tree, and make him spit water. Right then. War. The biggest chunk is about Mortal Kombat 4, remember that one? They're giving cheat codes for playing as Meat, who's like a bloody skeleton, and Noob Saibot, the ninja in black. For Meat, you have to win loads of one-on-one battles in arcade mode. For Noob Saibot, it's some button combo on the character select screen, up, left, then run and block. Crikey, you'd need to be quick. They also mention a code to play as Goro, but you need to get into a secret options menu first. Sounds like a faff, but worth it to play as Goro, eh? There's a secret options menu bit too, accessed by holding run and block on the options screen. In there you can change endings, fatalities, level fatalities and all sorts. All pretty standard cheat code stuff for MK4 really. Still, good to see it all laid out in the mag back then. Takes me back to thumbing through these pages for hours. The next page in this magazine is all about the Skill Club 64, remember that? Seems they were trying to get us all competitive, talking about jealousy and needing a trophy cabinet. Bit dramatic, wasn't it? Basically they had these Skill Club 64 challenges, and if you did a few you'd get a certificate, bronze, silver or gold, depending how many you managed. Apparently, these certificates were like hen's teeth, real prestigious, comparing them to pub quiz gongs, and for the real tryhards, they were giving away a Raypad controller, that third-party one, remember those? Said it was amazing, 91% impressive, crikey. Anyway, they've got lists of names here, loads of them, showing off all the people who made it into the silver and gold clubs. Silver Club for completing 7 challenges, gold for 10, it's pages and pages of names. Blokes from all over the place, Rotherham, even Norway and Australia. Each name's got a bunch of letters next to it too, A, B, C, all the way to K. Must be what challenges they did. So yeah, Skill Club 64, bit of a thing back then if you wanted to prove you were a proper gamer and get your name in the mag. Mad really when you look back at it, but we lapped it up, didn't we? This page from the magazine, yeah, it's the Skill Club 64 entry form. Right then, so they had this thing where you could prove you were a proper N64 player and get yourself into a league, bronze, silver or gold, depending on how many challenges you managed. Looking at the challenges now, some of them are a bit cheeky, aren't they? They've got a bunch of games listed, your big hitters from back then. Super Mario 64, obviously everyone was obsessed with that at the time. Getting all 120 stars was a proper task. Diddy Kong Racing, Lilac Wars, or Star Fox 64 as some of us still call it, GoldenEye 007, ISS 64, Mario Kart 64, all the usual suspects. Then you've got Pilot Wings 64, Turok, Dinosaur Hunter for your FPS fix, Blast Corps for a bit of destruction, Wave Race 64, Yoshi's Story for the younger gamers maybe, and Banjo-Kazooie. Rare were smashing it back then, weren't they? For each game they had a challenge set, like finishing Diddy Kong Racing in mirror mode, which, yeah, that was a pain. Or getting a gold medal in every Pilot Wings 64 event, fair enough. Some were about speed, some about completion. To prove it, you had to take a photo of your TV screen, or even send in a videotape. Remember having to do that? Faffing about with video leads and trying to get a clear picture. It was a different world, wasn't it? No screenshots at the touch of a button back then. There's a bit about rules, and how they'd spot cheats. Something about ritual humiliation if you were caught. Charming. And an entry form to send in, with your name and address. Imagine sending this off now. Feels like ancient history, doesn't it? But yeah, the Skill Club 64, good times for showing off your N64 skills, and maybe getting a badge and certificate. Proper old school gaming competition. This page, right then, takes us back to 1998 and an N64 Magazine competition, all about Banjo-Kazooie. Of course it is, everyone was mad about that game back then. So it's asking, are you the best at Banjo-Kazooie? And it's offering cash prizes if you are. Seems they were asking for speedrun times for different levels, like Mumbo's Mountain, Treasure Trove Cove, Clanker's Cavern, Bubblegloop Swamp and Gobi's Valley. The top prize for each level was a whole 30 quid, and even 50 quid for Mad Monster Mansion and Rusty Bucket Bay, Click Clock Wood. Blimey, 50 quid back then, you could buy a few games with that. And if you got the best total game time you could bag 100 quid, which was decent pocket money. Apparently, they'd had loads of entries already, and were surprised at how good some folks were, mentioning a time of 2 minutes 54 seconds for the first level. They were saying beat that if you can. They'd even extended the deadline for entries to November 2nd to get even more in. They reckon it's going to be hard to win, especially on the earlier levels. They're giving away proper folding money, not just vouchers or anything, enough to buy Zelda they reckon, or even a shiny new copy of Cruisin' World, fancy that. Looks like they are running these I'm the best leagues all the time, so even if you missed this one, you could still have a go at other games later. You just had to send your records to the magazine's address in Bath. Pretty straightforward really. And there's Banjo and Kazooie themselves, all over the page, doing their usual poses. Takes me back, it does. This page is a right trip down memory lane, isn't it? Looks like we're in the tips section of N64 Magazine, back when paper was still king. The big headline is, I'm the best, classic N64 Mag bravado. They're talking about scaling the mountain a male, which is a bit dramatic for reader letters about games, but hey, it was the 90s. They're banging on about high scores as usual. Someone called David Baker smashed the Wheatrix score apparently, with over 48 million points. Blimey. And there's a competition to win a Macopad controller if you can get over 6,000 points on 1080 degrees snowboarding's trick contest. Remember 1080 degrees? Good times. They always had some daft competition to try and get us playing even more. Then there's a Star Performance Award for a Rob Young from Hull for his Top Gear Rally skills. Top Gear Rally, now that was a decent racer for its time, wasn't it? Mind you, they were always giving out these awards. The rest of the page is crammed with high score tables for different games. Banjo-Kazooie, naturally, with Mumbo's Mountain listed. GoldenEye 007, showing off the fastest times for caverns, Bunker 2, and control levels. And of course, Super Mario 64, with times for Peach Slide. Loads of names and locations, people like Daniel Dunn from Lincolnshire, Michael Williams from Cardiff, and Stelios Giamarellos from Greece making the leaderboards. It's all confirmed scores too, so no cheating, hopefully. It's funny seeing these old scores and names now. Makes you wonder what happened to all these top players. Probably all grown up with mortgages and kids now, just like me. Still, good to see the old N64 spirit is alive and well, or at least it was back then in '98. This page of N64 Magazine, right, it's got the usual readers' letters and bits and bobs. Up top in the Club 64 section, it's all the admin stuff, like where to send your questions and moans and the email address, n64@futurenet.co.uk, remember that? They're still giving away those GameStar joypads for the star letter, and badges for the rest. Classic. Jute. The star letter this time is from some bloke called Luke Watts in Bagshot, who's been to Thailand and sent in some snaps of kids in a hill tribe village looking at the magazine. Apparently the local shaman in a check shirt is in one of the pictures too. Very exotic. He says they've never seen a computer game in this village with no running water or Lexi, but they had a good look at N64 Mag, bless 'em. Bit of a random one, but fair play for sending it in. Then there's the correction corner, always good for a chuckle when they get things wrong. Seems like they messed up the F1 World GP review, saying there were 18 tracks when there were only 17, but apparently there is a hidden one, so they're kind of right and wrong. And they can't spell massive, which is pretty standard for games mags back then, to be honest. Someone else is moaning about the Banjo-Kazooie guide. Something about an extra life being in the wrong place. And another nitpicker is on about a Radioactive Man vs. Batman thing in issue 20, page 91, calling it Radioactive Man vs. Batman, when it should have been Radioactive Man vs. Bartman. Who actually cares? They're blaming the spell checker, naturally. Then some football fan is arguing about who's better, Ipswich or Norwich. And another one chips in saying Arsenal and Bath City are actually the best. Passionate lot, gamers. Gamer. Finally, there's a letter called Diving, from Thomas Held in Pocklington about Pilotwings' double game guide. He reckons he went faster than 171 km per hour diving in little states, and even got up to 179 km per hour. He's saying he had photographic proof but wasn't quick enough to snap it. Right you are, mate. Ed, the editor, congratulates him and jokes about anyone beating that speed in a game of chicken at the usual address, whatever that means. The page is topped off with a picture of that cartoon diver character they used to have, nosediving into the page. Nosedive me into the ground. Cheers then, he says. Yeah, typical N64 mag. Bit ramshackle, but we loved it. This page in N64 Magazine, right, it's the Club 64 Feet section, where readers get to have their say, and Dr. Kitts is on hand with his game clinic. First up, someone sent in a picture, and blimey, it's a bit of a strange one. Ed, bless him, just calls it disturbing. Then there's Bob from Essex, having a pop about a quiz prize in issue 19. Seems like the closing dates were a bit of a mess and he's not happy he didn't get a prize, even though he entered on time. They admit they messed up closing dates a bit in general, those mags were always a bit rushed, weren't they? Matthew from Somerset's wondering about lapping in Mario Kart 64 single player, reckons he's only ever seen it with Peach doing the lapping, and it must be a glitch as it's so rare. Holly Johnston's pondering if Andros from Star Fox is getting a tan on some computer Atlas CD, bit of a random one that, da? Dr. Kit's Game Clinic is tackling questions about GoldenEye and Banjo-Kazooie. First off, David from Aloha is after the three-armed Bond cheat in GoldenEye, wanting to dual-wield weapons. Dr. Kitts explains it's a bit of a tricky weapon-swapping technique to get the Moonraker laser with another weapon, even though the Moonraker laser isn't actually a weapon in GoldenEye if you think about it. Cheeky Dr. Kitts. James from Oakbrook is lost in Banjo-Kazooie, can't find La Viva World because, well, it's not in the first game, is it? It's in Banjo-Tooie, Dr. Kitts points out. Typical confusion. He also asks about cobwebs on Gruntilda's statue. Easy peasy, just fire eggs at 'em. James from Doncaster is scratching his head about GoldenEye accuracy scores going over 100%, and Dr. Kitts explains that's down to the shotgun firing multiple pellets, confusing the accuracy meter, a classic glitch in that game. Jid from Holland has sent in a photo of a Spawn N64 cart, carved out of wood. Bit of an oddity, but fair play for effort. Then there's another reader still puzzled about GoldenEye accuracy scores, clearly a hot topic at the time. Finally, Few Feet section is giving mini reviews, slagging off Cruisin' USA for having buildings that pop up in the distance, haha, and praising Clayfighter 63 1/3 for its claymation animation, which was pretty impressive for the time, to be fair. All in all, a typical reader's page, bit of a mixed bag of questions, complaints and funny stuff. This page of N64 Magazine takes me right back, doesn't it? We've got the bonus letters section kicking things off, with readers moaning and praising as usual. Someone's asking about the 64D, D being Millennium Bug-Proof. Bless them, seems quaint now. Another reader is chuffed to get the magazine early, and then there's a bit of chatter about GoldenEye. Someone noticed you can shoot out the lights, who knew? And another one was wondering about funny coloured mines in some game, sounds a bit odd. Oh, and someone else didn't rate Glover very highly, which the editor seems to disagree with, calling it glovely, bit cringe that, even back then. And someone rented FIFA 98 instead of buying it thanks to the review, saving themselves a few quid. Good on them. Then there's a piece about first Zelda. Apparently some bloke called Niels at Hooft from the Netherlands reckons he had the first Zelda website way back in '96, called Zelda Headquarters. Says it even got featured in issue 20. The magazine's playing it cool, not getting into a who was first argument, but giving his site, zyq.com, a plug, saying it's good for Zelda fans and plays Zelda tunes while you browse. Nice touch. Cool. Finally, we've got the So Tell Me This Q&A section. Loads of questions about Banjo-Kazooie. Like when Banjo-Tooie is coming out, what kind of creature Tooie is, and if you can unlock secrets in Banjo-Kazooie. Someone's asking about Pocket Monsters, or Pokemon as everyone calls it now, coming with the 64DD ambitious thinking there. Then there's a question about Zelda and on-cart backup, someone asking about a coloured block around Link's sword in pictures, and release dates for Donkey Kong 64, Knife Edge, and Turok 2. The answers are pretty standard magazine fare really. When it's done for rare games, Zelda backup is cartridge-based, and a bit of waffle about the Donkey Kong 64 targeting system. Knife Edge and Turok 2 are a bit vague on release dates, next year hopefully, and no word yet respectively. Typical magazine guesswork really, but we lapped it up back then, didn't we? Oh, and there's a screenshot from Aero Gauge at the top, can't say I remember that one too well. And the Zelda website screenshot looks very 90s web, all brown and clunky, proper old internet, takes you back. This page is the N64 board section, right in the middle of the mag, and it's all about readers' letters and bits and bobs from the N64 Massive. At the top left there's a significant players bit, looks like readers are getting stuck in about a review of some fanzine called N64 Play. Seems there was a bit of a Barney after the deputy editor of the fanzine took offence to something N64 Magazine said, and now readers are giving their 2 pence worth. Tony from Manchester thinks N64 Play wasn't up to scratch rating Yoshi's story like Mortal Kombat Mythologies. Reckon he's got a point there, those are very different games in quality. Someone else, Peter Jordan, chimes in saying they think Yoshi's story and MK Mythologies are rubbish, strong words. Then Lisa Williams reckons N64 Magazine was wrong to criticise N64 Play over something about a women's breast article, and calls it immature and sexist. Bit harsh maybe? Ooh. Down below there are more letters. Derek's had a rough time having his game ideas dismissed by the press. Always tough to get good coverage. Richard Salmon's wondering what happened to Zai, someone who used to be in the mag. And Jonathan from Mepishall's got some questions about Mission Impossible and Mortal Kombat 4 release dates. Those release dates were always a moving target back then, weren't they? On the right hand side, it's all pinned up like a notice board. there's a Banjo-Kazooie picture with a funny caption about Banjo's wet nose, charming. Below that, there's another Banjo-Kazooie picture, must have been popular this month. Someone called Martin Weller likes Banjo better than Yoshi now, good for him. Then there's a picture of Mario in a toilet, captioned, "Icky is a poo." Bit childish, but hey, it's all a bit of fun, isn't it? And a Turok 2 picture, must be building up the hype for that dinosaur shooter, can't go wrong with a bit of Turok. Looks like someone called Alex Hammond sent in a Seeds of Evil picture, Vermilion style apparently, whatever that means. And someone else, Daniel Powell, is keeping the N64 flame alive with envelope art. Fair play to him. Yep, standard readers page, bit of feedback, bit of fun, and a load of game references to get us all excited for Christmas '98. This page is the N64 Con section, looks like a reader's marketplace bit from issue 22 of Planet 64 magazine. Right, let's have a butcher's. It's split into games for sale, games to swap and games wanted sections. Pretty standard stuff for these mags back in the day. Under games for sale, blimey, Nagano Winter Olympics, 98 for £35, must have been just after the actual Olympics I suppose. Wave Race, SNES games like Mario Kart and Zelda, that's a blast from the past isn't it? Forsaken and Mystical Ninja going for £30 each. Those were decent enough games weren't they? DKR, that's Diddy Kong Racing, and Extreme G, someone wants a bit for those. World Cup 98, everyone was obsessed with footy then, naturally. Japanese games boxed with instructions, must be imports, Wave Race, GoldenEye, Wild Choppers, all for decent prices. 1080 snowboarding, FIFA 98, Diddy Kong Racing again, seems popular. Games to swap section, someone's got Top Gear Rally, DKR, Mario Kart and Lilac Wars, wants to swap for GoldenEye, fair enough swap. Lilac Wars again, Diddy Kong Racing and Bomberman 64, getting about a bit these games. Snowboard Kids, Biofreaks, Top Gear World Cup, bit of a mix there. F1 Pole Position for swap or sale, Blast Core and Clay Fighter swap, bit of an odd pairing. Yoshi's Story plus the CD soundtrack, that's a nice little bonus. 2. Then Games Wanted, Mario Kart Wanted again, FIFA 98, and WCW vs NWO classic wrestling games. ISS 64, Lilac Wars, Fighter's Destiny, Snowboard Kids, and WCW vs NWO cropping up again. A bit repetitive isn't it? GoldenEye and Forsaken Wanted, those were the big hitters of course. N64 Magazine issues 16 Wanted 2, getting a bit collectory now. Fanzines section at the bottom, issues 419 for sale, £3.50 each, extras not included. Someone's flogging issue 1, with the N64 video for a £5, must be mint condition. Power. Overall, typical reader ads page, lots of folks trying to shift their old games or find something they're after. Pretty standard stuff from back then. Nostalgia trip seeing some of those game titles though, eh? This page is the reader advertisement section from the looks of it. Right at the back, bits of classifieds basically for N64 owners. It's all very quaint looking back, isn't it? You've got sections for games for sale, fanzines, games wanted, pen pals, games to swap, and even help wanted. Under games for sale, you've got people flogging fanzines. Remember them? Blimey, N64 Zone fanzine with reviews of GoldenEye and Banjo-Kazooie for just £2. Those were the days, eh? Someone else is selling manga videos, that was all the rage then. Pen pals is a proper blast from the past. Loads of kids wanting to write to each other, sharing interests in N64 and football and stuff. One lad, Marcus, wants a female pen pal who likes sports and poetry. Bit of an eclectic mix there. Another one needs help on GoldenEye deathmatches. It's sweet really. All very innocent compared to online gaming now. Pal who like. It's all a bit of a time capsule, isn't it? Just flicking through these little ads gives you a real sense of what being an N64 gamer was like back in '98. Simple times really. This page is all about what's coming soon in N64 Magazine, right? So, big news, it's the UK review for The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Crikey, that was a long time coming, wasn't it? Apparently after 23 issues of previews, they're finally going to give us the verdict on what was supposed to be the biggest game ever. Someone called Will, bless him, even had to fly out to Nintendo Europe's HQ for a pre-release play. Sounds a bit fancy, doesn't it? Then, they're banging on about a competition to win a car, a 10 grand V-Rally car no less. You had to get good at V-Rally to win it apparently, fair enough I suppose. There's a picture of the motor, looks like a Peugeot or something. And lastly, it mentions Speed Kings are reviewed, which turns out to be Wipeout going head-to-head with Extreme G2. Those were the days of futuristic races, weren't they? Wipeout and Extreme G. Always a bit of fun. Right at the bottom it says N64, the UK's best-selling. Gotta love a bit of self-promotion, eh? Issue 22 if you were collecting them back then. This page of N64 Magazine, issue 23, eh? Right then, looks like they're banging on about having 132 pages this month, trying to impress someone. Tipped! Section says something about V-Rally and a car giveaway, probably some competition you'd have to fill in and never win. Then there's the reviewed games, Knife Edge. That was one of those early N64 launch titles, wasn't it? Fighting robots, looked alright at the time I suppose. Scar's toy cars battling it out, never really grabbed me, looked a bit like Micro Machines on steroids. Holy Magic Century, or Evermore, in the US I think they called it, that was a bit different. An RPG, probably trying to cash in on the Zelda craze. And then NFL Quarterback Club vs Madden, 99, the usual American football face-off. Madden was always king in that genre though, wasn't it? New Shots, section mentions Shadowman 64, that looked a bit dark and spooky, supposed to be a bit grown up. For the N64 anyway. And then general news from N64 developers, probably just fluff to fill the pages. Under plus, it's just bullet points of what else is inside. First news on 1999's new games, well yeah, December issue, makes sense. Skill Club 64, I'm the best, sounds like some regular features. Stacks of new tips and cheats, always handy for getting through those tough bits. And Japanese and American games reviewed, good to know what was coming over from the import scene. Free! Bit is teasing some mystery gift, not a game guide this time, apparently something better. Bit vague, aren't they? But they are saying it's in the shops on Thursday the 26th of November, so that's the on-sale date for this issue. Don't miss it, they shout. Bit desperate, maybe sales were down? Anyway, that's the gist of this page, another issue of N64 Magazine back in '98. This page in the mag, yeah, it's the N64 quiz, proper retro that is, and they were giving away 50 quid. Back then, that actually felt like a decent wedge of cash. They're going on about the good old days when you could leave your door open, a bit dramatic as usual, just to set the scene for winning a bit of dosh. The quiz itself is 10 questions, all about N64 games of course. Looking at the questions, they're asking about characters like Diaz, probably from Perfect Dark I reckon, and what Gasp was called in the States, always renaming stuff, weren't they? Then there's stuff about V-Rally 99, asking about competition cars, and how many games were made in France that month. Bit of a random one. Perfect Dark pops up again asking what their aliens look like, and there's one about what NWO stands for, crossing over into wrestling which was massive at the time. They even chuck in a PlayStation game, Twisted Metal, for comparison, and then questions on Body Harvest and Rayman 2. Finally, asking about the Rat's weapon in Silicon Valley Space Station Silicon Valley of course. There's a picture of a V-Rally car looking moody, and a weird cartoon rat thing on wheels, must be from Silicon Valley, and a kangaroo fella, typical N64 character design. Over on the right, there's the index for issue 22, loads of previews and reviews in this issue. Looks like they were previewing All-Star Tennis 99, Extreme G2 and Quake 2, games everyone was hyped for back then. Reviews-wise, Body Harvest got looked at along with Gasp, Su F-Zero-X, Rayman 2 and Space Station Silicon Valley. Some proper bangers there. Banjo-Kazooie gets a mention in some compo, whatever that was. And of course, Perfect Dark is in there too, maybe a first look or something. Games like Vigilante 8 and WCW vs NWO, Revenge are mentioned, capturing that late 90s vibe perfectly. Bits and bobs for other sections like Future Look and Made in Japan are listed too. Down at the bottom, it's the How to Enter bit, telling you to fill in your details and send it off to some address in Bath. Closing date was November 30th, 1998. Standard rules about not being related to anyone at Future Publishing, and the editor picks the winner, probably with some help from Andrea. Prize in pounds, naturally. And a weird rule about Tim Tyler. Some bloke who couldn't smile, what's that all about? Warrington Knoll? Yeah, classic magazine page, quiz to win a few quid, index showing you what's inside, and all that late 90s N64 flavour. Takes you back.